This episode of the Real ResQ podcast is brought to you by SR3 Rescue Concepts, because you don't know what you don't know. Life-Saving Systems Corporation, we do our work so you can do yours. Tough gear for tough jobs. Breeze Eastern, the world's only dedicated hoist and winch provider. And Hilo Vodka, simply better vodka. SR3 ResQ Concepts is a training company that can help you with your helicopter training, a standardization and safety check, or maybe just an audit or an FAA refresher. They're ready to bring your agency up to date with current techniques, rules, regulations, and equipment. The training staff is amazing, with certified and flight instructor pilots, experienced crew members, which I'm happy to say that I get to be one of them. They offer training in rescue, medical, tactical, firefighting, ground operations, and night vision goggle use. SR3 has partnered with Petzl to assist with the PPE inspection course and the highly specific Lazard, which is used in helicopter cliff and mountain rescues. SR3 goes above and beyond the helicopter world too. They also provide high-angle rescue training and tactical medicine training. Contact them today at sr3rescueconcepts.com. That's sr3rescueconcepts.com. And follow them on Instagram at sr3_rescue. That's sr3_rescue. We're also brought to you by Life-Saving System Corporation. They manufacture the world's toughest helicopter rescue gear. From my favorite harness as a rescueman, the Triton, to the rescue baskets and litters, and of course the most popular hoist hook in helicopters, the D-Lock. The team at LSC cuts, bends, welds, sews, and machines these products into existence every day and then sends them on their way to us. We do our work so you can do yours. LSC, tough gear for tough jobs. Check them out today at lifesavingsystems.com. That's lifesavingsystems.com. And follow them on Instagram at ResQGEAR. That's at ResQGEAR. We're also brought to you by Breeze Eastern. Since the very first helicopter rescue in November 1945, Breeze Eastern has designed and manufactured superior rescue hoist solutions. While much of the technology and unique mission requirements have changed over the past 75 years, their commitment to the rescuers, the operators, and those who get rescued has not. Contact Breeze Eastern today by visiting them at breeze-eastern.com. That's breeze-eastern.com. And we are brought to you by Hilo Vodka. Hilo Vodka is a premium craft vodka, made from the highest quality ingredients and 6 times distilled. Hilo Vodka was made to be crisp, refreshing, and unintrusive. It's exactly how vodka should be made, clean enough to drink neat and worthy to be mixed with your favorite cocktails. They make a crisp, refreshing vodka that is carefully carbon filtered for a smooth sip and no bite. Hilo Vodka is 100% American made. It is proudly veteran owned by a former search and rescue pilot. Simply better vodka. Order yours today by visiting shophilovodka.com. That's shophilovodka.com. FedEx delivery is available in most states. Use the promo code ResQ and you get 10% off your order. Plus, if you buy 3 bottles or more, it's free shipping. Please remember to drink responsibly, and FAA Part 91 says 8 hours, bottle the throttle. Our next guest is a very good friend of mine who I have taken some great advice from. He comes on to us, he tells us a lot about the civilian side and how he got into the search and rescue, and even how he became a pilot, plus everything that's happened to him in his career. It's incredible. So, without further ado, please welcome my friend, Mr. Chris Gellene. My name is Jason Quinn. I am United States Coast Guard Rescue Swimmer number 500. These are my rescues and rescues from those of us that put our lives on the line every day so others may live. This is the Real ResQ Podcast. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Real ResQ podcast. Today, sitting in across from me, one of my best friends. Love this guy. I don't know if you're my best friend, but I'm going to play him as my
I'm
best
on the
friend.
list. I'm on the list.
Definitely. Yeah. You were at my wedding, so I got Mr. Chris Gellene.
Thank you for having me.
Dude, thank you for coming. I appreciate it. Yeah. Dude, we go back a little while now, actually.
I was thinking about that on the way over here, and what year did you guys start in the Gulf of Mexico?
It's 2010.
Okay, so then I'm thinking I got the SAR program. I think I got checked out in the 139 in 2010. Okay. So I was stuck in a helicopter, stuck in a training department, and they gave me as a I don't know, a bonus or whatever, because you didn't get much while you were there. I flew a Koala, which was a cool helicopter to fly, but I never got to graduate out of that. So they gave me the 139 in 2010, and then if that's when the SAR program started, I think I moved over in 2012. Yeah. Because when the SAR program started, I remember thinking there were qualified guys going into the program, is what my perception was.
Right.
And again, I was stuck in the 119, and I'd been passed over for a couple of different things at a couple of different times, because they always said that I was too good or needed in the position I was in. That happened. I got passed over for a 109 job for Shell, which paid better. The director of operations actually came to my defense, because the director of training at the time, I don't want to use names.
No worries. You don't have to use anything.
Yeah, he was like, no, Gellene can't be considered for this because he's too required in his job. And the DO was like, so because you need him, he's missing an opportunity. And Paul, the director of training, was like, yeah, but we'll make it up to him in another way. And the DO was like, well, what other way? So anyway, some horse trade, and I didn't get the position, but they gave me something again, probably what wound up being the 139, which is like a token thing, right? So then when the SAR program came out, I was like, I knew I wanted to get into the SAR program, right? But I figured it was going to be a long road. So opening had come up, and I put my name in for it, and the chief pilot at the time said the same thing. He's like, you're too necessary in the position you're in. And I said, well, I'm hearing this from you for the first time, but I've heard it from your predecessor and the previous director of training and the previous DO and blah blah blah. So I said, put my credentials or whatever against whoever's applying for the position. I said, and if somebody more qualified than me gets the job, they get the job. I said, but if I'm more qualified, I understand you can't too necessary in my job, you can't replace me immediately, so put a placeholder in. And I said, but make no mistake, if I'm the most qualified guy and you don't offer me the job, you're going to have to be looking for that SAR pilot and a Koala check airman or whatever it was, And I said, that is a you problem, not a me problem, and it shouldn't be that difficult to replace me. Like I've said, there's a lot. Like, I don't make good decisions. Like you have one look at me and I'm like, you can tell I should not be left unsupervised, right? So anyway,
that's the good stories that we have.
Yeah. So
my wife would approve of every one of them too, by the way. Just most of them. Sorry.
Yeah. But anyway, I had to argue my way into the SAR program, and it turned out I was the most qualified. And I was trying to be understanding with them. I said, look, put a placeholder in. I said, but don't think I'm going to get comfortable in this position. I said, and when it comes time for me to swap seats, when you find my replacement, and we don't know why it's that difficult to do that, but when you do, I'm going into the SAR program. And I remember sitting with you in the back of the 139 in Lake Charles on the ramp. Like you guys were stuck there for something. I can't remember what it was. I was unsurprisingly doing some training in a Koala. So I came in, shut down, and I remember talking to you Eben, and it might have been John Inman.
Yeah.
Inman or Pat Barber. It was either Inman or Barber, but I think it was Inman. Anyway, and I remember talking with you like about getting into the SAR program, and I was like kind of had the same thing I've said to you a bunch. I'm like, I'm super interested in getting to this program, but you know, I wanted to make sure that I didn't freak anybody out. I didn't scare anybody. I was like, I'm not being humble. I'm like, I don't want to be somebody in the front that the guys in the back are like, oh shit, like Gellene's on it tonight. Like everyone, like, you know, has got to be on alert. Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
I love how you just said you don't want to be humble about it. Yeah.
No, I didn't. I mean, I'm not saying it to be humble. Like I was and am legitimate. If I was like, I wanted to, if I wasn't good enough.
Yeah.
I got thick skin. I'll bow out. Like I was thinking to myself about what high caliber pilots were in the program. But anyway, as it turns out, I don't always scare everybody in the back.
No,
yeah.
No, you don't.
Yeah. So when we first met was 2012.
Yeah.
And then
on the ramp
in Lake Charles would be probably the first for. Maybe a year before that. I don't remember when I joined the SAR program, but somewhere between 2010, I'm sure. Because by 2012, I was definitely in the SAR program.
Yeah.
So
coming
somewhere
in,
around
and
yeah.
That's where we started hanging out, really hitting it off.
Yeah.
All right, so now before we go too far, please introduce yourself to everybody else out there. A little bit of background, where you're from, how you got to be a pilot. Because I'm kind of curious myself.
Yeah.
Even though I already know this, I'd like to hear it again.
I don't know if you know all of it, but yeah. So I grew up in a small town in New Jersey called Totowa, New Jersey.
What exit?
You know, this is embarrassing, but I've been out of state for so long, I don't remember which it would be. And I want to say if it's on the Parkway, it's 17C or something like that. Or that's the Turnpike. And the Parkway is 150 something. But anyway.
So for everybody else that doesn't understand New Jersey, there's two main roads that drive north and south in New Jersey. The Turnpike and the Parkway. And you live off one of those exits in that state.
Yeah. Everybody lives off one of those exits.
That's right.
Yeah.
So when you started, I'm from Jersey.
What
exit?
Yeah. And I'm embarrassed to say I don't remember what exit it was. But it's Totowa, New Jersey, small town in New Jersey. And this will come in a little bit, I guess, my background for how I got into flying. I used to carry a notebook with me. I still kind of do almost always have a little notepad with me. Now you got your phone, so you can always take notes. But I was making a list of things I wanted or needed, and on that list was I needed a cordless screwdriver, I needed a tape measure, and I'm pretty sure a helicopter flew past because I put down on the list, learn to fly helicopters. And I got the cordless screwdriver, and I got the tape measure, and then I was like, I got down to learn to fly helicopters. So I started looking into it, right? So that, and part of it was, too, when I was a kid in Totowa, I had a newspaper route, and I remember on that route, there was some guy in his backyard building an airplane in his shed. And for whatever reason, that just made a connection of, like, something you can do. Like, you just take the step, figure out the steps to do it, and you can do it more or less, you know? Yeah. So then I started, you know, and that list was it was a long time ago. So
I love the list.
I started looking. Well, it's funny. Some people are like I got a friend named Jens. Like he eats, sleeps, and shits aviation. He was a Airbus engineer or something like that.
Okay.
So when a plane goes by, he knows the engines in it and the thrust and all that sort of stuff. Like he knows about almost everything that goes past.
I'm geeking out, man.
He's geeking out, exactly. Anyway,
that's awesome.
Yeah. So he he's always wanted to be a pilot, you know, and I got another good friend of mine, Chris DiDiego. Did you know Chris?
I did not.
I don't know if he was that era in 2010, but super good guy. And anyway, he wanted to learn how to fly because he wanted to get to the top of a mountain, and he thought it would take less effort to learn to fly helicopters and take a helicopter up there than hike it. So I like everybody's reason for getting into aviation is a little bit different. So so mine was on a list. Yeah.
On a list.
So, and I also always thought to myself about flying when it came down to the things on the list that I got down to. I was like, that's got to be a pretty good job, because I was under the misimpression that you used your brain a lot as a pilot. So I kept thinking, like, everybody always said, like, as a pilot, you have to.
For all you young kids out there, you have to be got to be smart. You got to know what you're doing.
In not in the way you think though. Like, it's everyone thinks pilots are good at math, and I can assure you, pilots can't add. So. That's not true that you have to be good at math at all. You know? So anyway, that's what I thought. I thought
you're flying at this speed with this headwind, this fuel burn.
At this point, it's 2 miles a minute. It's like it's not hard. You know, it's not difficult math. Sometimes, and I do think
God bless the new computers that are in it.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, you just need to know how to finger the buttons. You know. So, yeah. So, and that gets you through a lot of things in life.
Yeah, right.
So, but I thought it was the perfect cross between sitting in an office using your head and then outside, sweating.
Yeah.
So it's the best of both worlds.
Yeah.
Like, you're outside sweating and you're not really using your brain. So.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, but anyway, but then you get to have fun with it, and this is what I thought of for the SAR program.
Yeah.
I thought what I left out of the story before was I thought I was going to have to be climbing over people to get into the SAR program. I thought everybody wanted to do it because you see somebody, like, to pull up to a hover over the open water and kick somebody out of the back is like, that's who doesn't want to do that. Who doesn't want to do that?
Right, exactly. That's what I say all the time.
And I'm up front with the opportunity to do that. So I thought people were going to be crawling over each other. And it turned out the company I worked for, nobody wanted to do it.
Yeah.
Now, part of the reason why nobody wanted to do it, and I understand this, I think, is because they saw it was a little bit of a shit show. You know,
right.
Like, it wasn't It
was hard. It was being built.
It was being built, yeah. And so when you're building something like that, a lot of people don't know what they don't know, and they put a lot of preconceptions on things, Like, as an example, our old director of operations, the one that came to my defense, one day we were discussing getting night vision goggles, right?
Yeah.
And they cost, I'm going to pardon my ignorance, maybe $10,000 a pair, something like that.
Yeah. Sounds good. Yeah. They're expensive.
But $10,000 a pair. So, and we're talking about a $16 to $20 million helicopter, right?
Yeah.
So, like, that's not an unreasonable expense.
Right.
He wanted to know if instead of buying 2 pairs, we just bought one, and whoever was flying the approach would use the goggles. And then if it turned out to be a left seat landing, the right seat pilot would just take the goggles and hand them to the other guy. Like, that was something he considered. Like,
yeah.
that seemed reasonable to him, right?
And that is something that someone doesn't know or understand the
they
full
don't know
aspect.
what they don't know. Exactly. Yeah.
So like, if you break that down just a little bit and you're like, wow, that's actually not a bad idea. You're thinking outside the box. At the same time, that is a terrible idea.
It's hard when you say there's no such thing as a stupid question, right? Because I used to say that. One of the things I always said, and again, like, in the self-deprecating way, but every course I ever, like, ground course, I say every ground course I ever started, one of the things I got in the habit of saying was the guy in the room is full of shit. Feel free to question anything that I say. If something I say doesn't ring true to you, let me know. Yeah. Because I'm not here to to bullshit you. I'm here to pass on the information that I have, and things in the way I understand them. So if I say something and it doesn't sound right to you, question me on it. I'm open to any of that stuff, right?
Yeah.
And it doesn't matter who you are or what experience you bring to the table. Every voice is valid. And so but people don't often like to speak up. So I also always offer that anything, if you stop me on a break and ask me something, when I get back into class, the first thing I'm going to do is bring up the question you asked. I said, so you can ask it in class or on a break, whatever you're more comfortable with, but I'm going to bring it up in front of the class either way. Yep. So as you like.
Yeah.
And I also used to
Which is good practice, by the way, because you don't know if somebody else has that same question.
This is what I said.
Different way.
This is exactly what I said.
Sorry, I took the thunder right out from under you.
No. There's plenty of thunder.
Oh, nice.
But great minds think alike. Because this is what I said was, whatever you're thinking, someone else in the room is probably thinking. And if you're thinking something that no one else in the room is thinking, it's probably a good question. So one of the things I learned as an instructor was, even through my own experiences, I'm the average pilot in everything, right?
By the way, he's being very humble with that, because Chris is one of the best pilots I've flown with, and that's not to bullshit you. Okay, I truly mean that.
I'll circle back to that, or actually, I'll address that now. That was one of the things that I thought about joining the STAR program, was you guys in the back are going to be, like, in the best possible way, good critics of the guys up front, because you're not self-loading baggage.
Or am I not?
Say again?
Am I not a good critic?
No, you guys are.
Okay, just checking.
No, but I was concerned. I was concerned about that. I say concerned. I knew that if I wasn't good enough, you guys would tell me, and you would have a strong opinion, because you fly with a lot of different guys, so you know a good pilot from a bad pilot, blah blah blah. But and I don't know why I'm saying that, but
because I think you're a good pilot,
and I appreciate that. I do appreciate that. But for whatever reason, I thought at the time that, like, you guys you can't bullshit past you guys. Like,
right.
It took me a long time to figure this stuff out, but somebody, the phrase, you can't bullshit a bullshitter.
Oh, yeah.
I didn't really know what that meant. And then when I did know what it meant, because I'm a bullshitter, I was like, oh, that's why you can't run lines of bullshit past me, because I'm a bullshitter, right? So for you guys in the back, I was like, they'll know, not right away, but you'll know a good from bad, and I don't want to be a bad pilot for you guys. So I was like, I thought that was, anyway, I think I have a high opinion of you guys in the back. So for you to say I'm a good pilot, I very much appreciate that.
Hey, no problem. Yeah. And I will tell you, like, just to go on record and boost your ego just a little bit more, there are times we've been like, you know who we need flying right now is Chris Gellene. Just put him in the front, him and JJ or Eugene or
Piper.
Yeah, Piper.
Peter. Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Noah on occasion.
Noah. Yeah.
I'm just kidding, Noah. I love you, buddy. I would take Noah.
Yeah. Noah, I think, as I've written or spoken recommendations about him, I say he's an asset in and out of the cockpit. Noah's an awesome guy. Yeah.
Totally.
Noah and I got crazy history together too, which we won't go into. But so, we're talking about how I got started flying, I guess.
Yeah, diverted. That's all right.
Yeah.
So I'll tell you what. We'll get back on track. So you got flying. You made a list. Boom. There you are. Now you're in flight school. You get through flight school. And
so going to flight school, this was another thing. I was like, you go to flight school, you're a one-trick pony. Like, when you get done with flight school, if you can't find a job, like, you're not qualified to do anything else. You're not qualified to fuel a helicopter. Like, you just spent the equivalent of a 4-year college degree, and maybe not so anymore. I don't know. I mean, everything, inflation's kind of crazy.
Yeah.
But, like, I was looking at, I could either do a 4-year degree, or I could learn to fly helicopters. And again, I decided I'm going to learn to fly helicopters. And then, I worked at a really cool flight school in Titusville, Florida. And then I tried to get on. I wanted to work at Air Helicopters is what I wanted to do. Yep. I had a guy, Rick Holbrook, who was an instructor at the flight school I was at. He gave me 2 pieces of advice that I appreciated. One was get as much nighttime as you can before you leave flight instruction, because you're never going to get nighttime again.
Nice.
And you need 100 hours a night, I think it is, for an ATP.
Okay.
So, like, that'll be the thing that holds you up. It wasn't the thing that held me up, because I got the 100 hours a night as he suggested I do. And he said, keep your resume short. like don't have a lot of names on your resume, because he already, I think, felt like he had too many on his resume at the time.
Like job resume or
like
companies?
Pilots are gypsies, right?
We're
pretty much a bunch of horses. So
go
he was
everywhere.
like, you don't want to have 5 names in 2 years.
Yeah.
So anyway, he worked at ERA in Alaska, and then ERA at the time was a diverse company. Like, they didn't have a SAR program or anything, but they had operations in Alaska. They did firefighting in Nevada. And anyway, by the time I got to apply for them, it was for a seasonal tour position. I didn't get it. So I waited another year to apply. ERA had sold at the time to
Secor,
Secor, yeah. So I got on with ERA at that time through the company Texair. So that's who they merged with. ERA. I had just contacted. They said they weren't hiring, and then a buddy of mine at Texair was like, "Yeah, we're actually definitely hiring." And a buddy of mine at the time that was flying tours in Alaska got. This is the thing, like we were saying about the DO. Like, people don't know what they don't know. The Alaska guys. A friend of mine at the time that did get the tour job the year before was, at the end of the tour jobs, they would offer some guys Gulf of Mexico gigs, right? And so they'd check you out as a co-pilot in the 412. So he is getting to go through the 412 course. ERA is not hiring, or sorry, in the middle, at the end of the course, they lay him off. Because when the companies merged, they told them that they had redundancies in positions or whatever, right? So the first thing those managers did was fire the pilots. Then the managers got back to Texair and they said, okay, we reduced the headcount or whatever by however many were in that class. And they're like, you did what? Like, well, you said we had 4 redundant positions or 6 or whatever it was, so we got rid of the pilots. Like, no, we are short pilots. We are redundant mid-level managers, and I think you've just made our decision for us. So they basically cleaned ERA out. And then a bunch of Texair guys took over. Probably wasn't the greatest thing for ERA, but Texair, my buddy that was at Texair at the time, a guy named Clay, he said, no, we're hiring. So I hired on through them, knowing it was the same company.
Nice.
Texair, Texair was. I don't think I would have applied at Texair had they had not merged.
Yeah, I got you.
But anyway, so that's how I got into the Gulf of Mexico, and then the SAR program. So
before you get to the SAR program, I want you to tell a story.
Oh,
so you had to get kind of. I'm gonna call it rescued, but you really didn't have to get rescued.
I did. I got picked up.
You got picked up. You got picked up.
Yeah.
But this is there's a reason I want to bring this up is because, spoiler alert, we had an accident. Or Chris had. I don't know if
it was not an accident.
It was not an accident. It was
We had an occurrence.
There we go. Great. I like that. That's a good word. We had an occurrence. Yeah. But there's a lot of great learning lessons out of that I took personally from listening to you, including the aftermath and what you had to do.
Yeah, that's a big thing.
It is a big thing. So if you don't mind, just kind of give us a little rundown about some of that, and then you just tell what you want.
So there I was.
Those are my favorite kind of beginnings. I love it.
You're going to edit in some ominous music.
Whatever.
And stuff, right? So when I interviewed for ERA and I was offered the position, the Texair, they asked if I had any questions, after whatever the standard interview stuff there was. And I said, yeah. I said, can I never fly the EC-120? And they were like, yeah. And they looked at my resume, and like I said, because I had spent an extra year in flight training, like I had to get into the Gulf of Mexico at the time, you needed 1,000 hours or something like that. And I probably had 2,000 or 2,500. So at the time, it was like a stronger resume. They were like, oh, yeah, with your, and it's not a strong resume. They were like, yeah, you shouldn't have to fly the 120. You're going to start in the 206. And I was like, yeah. And I never wanted to fly the EC-120 because I just knew, I don't know how, somebody had told me at some point that it was a very underpowered helicopter. So I just knew in the Gulf of Mexico where it's hot and you're going to be heavy taking off offshore, like it can be in the summer, it's going to be a lot of work. And I was like, I don't want to spend my whole day fighting. Like when I was told the 120 was an underpowered helicopter. So they said, yeah, should never have to fly it. Fast forward, now I'm working at Everett, and they're like, hey, you're going to start flying the AC-120. So I was like, fuckers, right? Like, that's the one thing I said I didn't want to do. So, but you do what the company tells you to do, right? It's what the company needs. So yep. I at the time, they did the ground training through CTS. So no ground, just through CTS. I did.
CTS is
computer training systems.
Okay.
So under Part 135, you have you've got approved training programs, and if you have CTS is a training provider for a lot of different subjects, and for a lot of subjects they are really good. For aircraft subjects, they do tend to be actually really good, but not for your initial entrance to an aircraft. It relies too much on you
knowing a little bit.
Yeah, and there's no interaction, that sort of stuff, you know. So anyway, I get checked out in the EC-120, and then they put me right back in the 206. So, and this was not an uncommon thing to do, where a company need puts you wherever you're going to put you.
Right.
Now, I was happy to get back into the 206. I was like, I like flying the little 206. Like, it was okay. It's a predictable helicopter. So then a month or two later, they put me in the EC-120, and the first day I show up, this is where I met, this is not a segue, but this is where I met JJ.
Oh, nice.
Very first day I meet JJ, it's Jason Johnson, right? So I work with him now. Don't have enough good things to say about the guy.
Love JJ.
Love me some JJ. So I fly into I land in the Gulf of Mexico. I had a piece of shit Gulf car, airport car, and you could look ahead at your schedule and find out where you were going to be. And so when I looked ahead at the schedule, the helicopter I usually flew was at a different base. My name was in another base. It was a little bit screwy. And anyway, I land in Houston. I go down to I land in Houston. I thought I was going to Galveston. Chief pilot's like, do you know where you're going? I'm like, no, I thought I was going to Galveston. No, your contract's in Fushan. I was like, Fushan? And it's
that's a drive.
Yeah, it's 5 hours. It's 5 or something in the afternoon. And anyway, now I got to drive to Fushan. I've never been to Fushan. The chief pilot, or whatever he was, this guy named Errol Bowden, he gives me these directions, and he gives me shitty directions. He says, if you get to a bridge, if you cross the bridge, you've gone too far. And in a philosophical way, he's right, because when you cross the bridge, you get very close to Fushan, and you don't want to ever really get that close to Fushan, right? So anyway, and I've got this shitty little E-Trex GPS. It's like a hunting GPS, but it was whatever. And so it didn't do roads, but I could see I need to get over in that general direction. So I finally get onto the base in Fushan, and it's after hours, and I'm walking around, and I see a guy on the steps, and I'm like, hey man, I said, I'm sorry, it's my first day here. I said, do you know where the pilot trailers are? He goes, man, I'm from Alaska. He goes, I don't know shit about this place. Let's go figure this out. And I was like, okay, cool, I like this guy. So that's JJ, and we figure it out. The base lead is giving me a bunch of grief. He's like, you're not, this is after hours, blah, blah, blah. You're not supposed to be here. I'm like, buddy, I wasn't planning on having this conversation with anybody tonight. I'm like, I thought my job was in Galveston. When I landed in Houston, I would have been there in an hour, no duty time issues, blah, blah, blah. Right. And this guy was a talker, not a listener. So he's just like, you're supposed to be here, blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, I understand that. Trust me, I'm the one that just drove from Houston. I'm not, if either of us is upset, more upset, trust me, it's me. I'm like, this anyway. So the helicopter is grounded for some AD, some paperwork thing, somebody, whatever, some glitch. So my opposite, because I got there so late, I didn't get to see him. He left me a bunch of a couple index cards with notes of what happened. So in this particular helicopter, it's an underpowered helicopter, as I said. Yep. There's 2 screens in the middle that give you all of your engine parameters. It's called your vehicle engine monitoring display or something like that, your VEMD, and it gives you all of your engine instruments, and then the power you're pulling and all this sort of stuff. So he had that indication system, the VMD, fail on him on a takeoff offshore. He over-torqued the helicopter, which just simply means he pulled too much engine power.
Yep.
Like the engine, it's more than the transmission can take, right? So he pulled into the transient or whatever by like 2% or 3% or something like that. It wasn't a large exceedance at all. But he said, then we're also having subsequent chip lights. And I can't remember if he said engine chips or transmission chip or whatever, but it was a chip. And so, cool.
So a chip light is going to be, basically it's something that if you have metal shavings coming off of the gearbox or something to that effect, and it goes around into a magnet that is sitting on the inside, like a cannon plug per se, or it's a spot inside that section, and that magnet will attract that little piece of metal. When that metal gets to it, you get a light in the cockpit saying
bridges the contact, you get a light.
Right. So it's an indication, basically, holy cow, it could be falling apart, and yet it could be just a little.
It could also just be nothing. So like in the 206 as an example, I used to I had engine chip lights all the time. It was like, this will come up in a little bit, but I had engine chip lights before, so I was like, it's not that big. It's not necessarily that big of a deal, right?
Well, so I remember, we have them in the 139 quite often. You just hit the burn switch, and
and ideally it burns it. If it's a small particle of metal, it gives it a little more electric current that blows the fuse as it is, and then the light goes out, and you're good to go. Yeah, it's indicative that it was not a major problem.
Correct.
And that's the most common occurrence of these. That's why you have a fuzz burn, what's called a fuzz burner on the helicopter, because generally they're not that big of a deal. So, the helicopter's grounded for a day, and then the next day I go and fly. And this helicopter, the EC-120. The rotor system spins in what I would refer to as the wrong direction, meaning that the aerodynamics of a helicopter are such that one of the hardest things to do in a helicopter is to hover it, to keep it in one place, right? Yep. So the helicopter is referred to as dynamically unstable. Like it doesn't. It goes to a state of chaos. Right. Yeah. So you have to keep all the forces in balance, right? So
it's basically standing on a basketball.
It's a good way to. Exactly. So when you hover a helicopter, the main rotor spins in one direction, and let's just say you're looking forward, and the rotor spins from left to right. When it does that, the fuselage of the helicopter, for every action, there's an equal and opposite reaction. The fuselage of a helicopter wants to spin in the other direction, right? So when the tail rotor is positioned so that counteracts the potential rotation of the fuselage instead of the main rotor. So if the blades spin in one direction, the pedals for the tail rotor when you pick up a helicopter, in order to keep it in one position, in most helicopters, in the helicopter have 2,500 hours or 3,000 hours of time. That when you pull a helicopter up off the ground with a collective, you apply left pedal. So with now this EC-120, it's the opposite. When you raise the collective, now the rotor spins in the other direction. You have to put in the opposite pedal, so it's right pedal. Even though that's wrong, it actually is a much more natural way to fly the helicopter. And if you can't see me, it'll come to when you raise the helicopter with the collective in your left hand. If you have to apply left pedal when you do that, you stretch out. Right?
Oh yeah. So I didn't even think of that.
Yeah. So
not a pilot. So
yeah. So the way I think of it is in the EC-120 and a lot of Eurocopter helicopters, when you raise the collective, you put in right pedal, which by default in the helicopter, the other pedal comes back. So they react off of each other. Like you put one pedal forward, the other pedal comes back. Yep. Right. So now with the collective in your left hand, as you raise it, because your left pedal comes back, your foot is actually attached to the collective. So if you consider it like a rope attached, it's a more natural mechanical.
Yeah.
Okay. Anyway, so 2,500 hours, whatever it is, in a conventional rotor system.
Yep.
And now we're talking my first 5 or 7, as it was by the end of the day. 7 hours in a helicopter that the flight controls are backwards. They operate backwards, So anyway, it takes people a little while to figure that out. And now I trained in it. Yep. Had 2 months off, and now I'm flying it again. So, and at that time, I had 3 to 5 hours in the helicopter. Like, there wasn't a lot of flight time in the helicopter. So, and over 2 months, I was not Johnny on the spot in that helicopter, right? So, I'm flying it on a brand new contract out of Fushan, and I land on a rig, South Tim 58 or something like that. I forget. They all look the same to me. So. Yeah. So I land, and the guys on the deck are like, "Hey, have you ever been to this platform before?" And I said, "Nope, first time." He goes, "Okay, we need to give you a briefing or whatever." So I'm like, "Okay, cool." And he goes, "But the lead or whatever the guy's name is, whatever his title is, he's on the +10 tied up to some amberjack. So he'll be with you when he's done with that." And I was like, "Are you telling me that the lead pilot is too busy fishing to give me a safety briefing?" And he was like, when you put it that way. And I was like, "I'm going to like this contract because that's all I want to do, right? I don't want to sit down and get safety briefings. I want to fish." So I go downstairs. I see him. He's got a bunch of amberjack bleeding out, right? Because you got to bleed them. And he gives me a safety briefing, and he basically says, "Yeah, I got nothing else for you." I said, "There's one guy who needs to get back to the beach. Take him in." So I was like, "Okay, cool. Pretty easy contract." So I'm flying back to Fushan, and one of the things they have at Fushan is when you're 10 miles out, you're supposed to be down at 500 feet. So, and I'm 15 miles, as happens, I'm 14 miles out. 14 miles out, and I'm down at 500 feet, and I get a red light in the cockpit and a gong, right? And so it goes gong and a light in the cockpit. I always say you lose a day, like your heart is like, "Fuh." So I lose a day, and I look up, and I'm like, okay, and the red light says engine P. Now, I am not very familiar with how this helicopter works. So I looked at it. I said, "Engine P? It's a French design." I'm like, "But why would they say engine chip with the letter P? That doesn't make any sense." And I was like, engine P. And by the time that thought crossed through my head, bang! And the engine quits, right? Now, I was like, "Oh, shit." And I dumped the collective, and I put in left pedal, because that's what you do in this helicopter, and I started turn 90 degrees because I'm downwind, right?
Yeah.
And so I turn into the wind, and I'm looking inside, and I can't make heads or tails of any of the instruments inside the helicopter, right? So this you need a visual for, but the rotor tack on this thing is, and the rotor tack is how you read the rotor speed, right? And there's a governor, so it keeps it at a speed that for almost all helicopters you're going to say it's 100%, right? So, and then on that tachometer, there's a second needle that is the engine that's driving the transmission for the rotor, right? So generally those two needles are superimposed. On this helicopter, they're actually little LCD lights, little green lights. LCD is like, it's just a little backlit light kind of thing. Yeah. Anyway, it's two little ones on maybe a 2-inch diameter instrument.
Okay.
And they're both green, and they're both the same size. So to look at it, like, it's not an intuitive thing to look at. And anyway, again, I'm 500 feet downwind. Dump the collective. I look inside, and I'm like, "Nope." I'm not getting anything out of this. And so I turn into the wind, and I slowly start to raise the collective, because I'm thinking, I don't want to be one of those guys that had like a tachometer failure and landed on the water with the engine running.
Yeah.
Right? And that happens, right? And I can't fault people necessarily for it, because the guy that does that isn't trying to do that, like
right.
he's doing his best.
Yeah, he's going through the standard checks that are the training.
He misinterprets stuff. It's
easy,
it's easy to do that. And like a tachometer failure will give you a low rotor horn, like you're like you're losing rotor. And again, if you dump the collective, which is what you're supposed to do, for people who don't know what it means, that's what you're supposed to do. And at that point, all your engine instruments drop off, because you just lowered the engine demand from the helicopter.
Yeah.
So it can look like you have an engine failure. So it's easy to misinterpret this stuff. So anyway, I'm now faced with like, hey, maybe I don't want to land on the water with the engine running. So before I blow the floats, I raise the collective to see if I can fly out of it. And again, I can't make heads or tails of the instruments inside, so I'm raising the collective to try and fly out of it, and I get the low rotor horn. So now I am convinced I've had an engine failure, and I blow the floats. And that's the second bang that occurs, right? So there's nitrogen bottles that in this helicopter, there's a grip on the front of the cycle. It looks like a brake lever from like a BMX bike.
Yeah. And
you pull it, and the floats pop. So floats pop, and I am now convinced that I have an engine failure, so I put out a mayday call. One of the things I learned in primary flight training was from a guy named Richard Manley, who looks like Mr. Bean, if you know who Mr. Bean is.
I do.
Yeah. So he looks remarkably like Mr. Bean. So good guy, British guy also, and he was in one of the practice areas, and he had an engine failure. This was back in flight school, right? In 2000 or 2001, whatever it was. And he has an engine failure, and he puts out a mayday call, something like, mayday, 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 315 has had an engine failure in area 2. And everyone gets on the radio, is like, Richard! Richard, did you have an engine failure? He's like, yep, I did. We're safely on the ground here on, whatever practice area they were. So the next, instructor meeting, Monday morning meetings, he talked about it, and what he said was not enough people practice mayday calls. And so I always incorporated that, and once I learned that, I'm like, I'm going to pass this on, because it's true. People don't practice mayday calls. No. So I got in my thing, because I'm a parrot, I repeat myself a lot. The thing I had said at the time was, let's play it out. Let's go for a scenario here. You're flying along, perfectly good helicopter, engine fails, and you are a really good pilot, and you enter an auto rotation, you find a spot, you flare, you level, you cushion, you're on the ground, no damage done, nobody knows where you are. Now let's run scenario number 2. You're not Johnny on the spot. You don't know where the collective in time. You over control. You flare too high. You level. You run out of airspeed. You crash. You can't feel your legs. You smell jet fuel. You look up. You see an alligator walking towards you, and nobody knows you're there. So get out a mayday call. If you can. And most people can, after you sort yourself out in the descent, you get a mayday call. And if you practice it, like everything, once you practice it, things get easier the more you practice, right? So I got out a mayday call, mayday, 80 Charlie's got an engine failure, 14 miles. Now, you can get out a call like that because people know what it means anyway, and if nobody else is talking. Our radio was congested, so there were a couple helicopters that garbled the radio, and the dispatcher said, there's too many helicopters talking, aircraft landing, say again. I thought she meant me. So I get out another mayday call, but I'm mid-flare at the time. So one of the things with the
I don't think I knew that. That's hilarious.
Yeah, no, my second mayday call is mid-flare, and what's really cool is we have it recorded, so I can try and get it for you, actually. Maybe you can play it. I'll see if I can get it. Yeah, you might be able to fuse that in. So, and we used to play it in training, and I was like, I don't know that you want to play that for training, because what happened was, as I made the second mayday call, the dispatcher also didn't hear it. And so somebody else, I think it was, what was the dude that retired from SAR, that he said he lived like he did, so he lived like he could. He just saved up all his money. to it.
AI Miller.
AI Miller. AI was communicating with me on the radio at the time. He was flying in a 412.
Oh.
So he is actually who heard my Mayday call because
Wow.
the dispatcher didn't. So I was relaying stuff to him, which is pretty cool. Like you can hear it. But as from a training standpoint, the dispatcher didn't hear it. So I was like, I don't know that you want to necessarily play this for new hires. Like, do you want to have this idea that the people in the room are like, looking out for you? So and when I play it for you, you'll understand. So anyway. I relay my position, and they send people out looking for me. JJ hears my Mayday call, and he's flying a Koala for whatever the company was, and he told the guy, he goes, Air Helicopters is buying this helicopter back, and we're going to go look for this guy. I always choke up with this. So he said, he's like, I'm buying the helicopter back. We're going to go look for this guy. Now, he didn't know that I was safely upright. But I always thought, like, that's admirable,
Yeah.
So I was like, he's the first guy that made my Christmas card list that day. So
what a nice guy. Way to go,
yeah,
JJ.
I've always thought the world of JJ ever since that, event, right? So anyway, I'm floating on the water, and I got a guy sitting next to me who was just like fucking pie-eyed. Like, what the fuck just happened, right? And so he's your typical offshore worker. No disrespect, but as I said, under I think it was while I was under deposition for this incident, he was not what I would refer to as an athlete. So when we're on the water floating, he turns and looks at me, and he's like, what happened? Now, you know this about me. I'm a bit of a wise ass, right?
Yeah.
So I instinctively wanted to say, well, we just had an engine failure, and this is the fourth one that's happened, and they do it different every time. But my father was a lawyer, and I thought to myself, I will regret saying that if I say it. So I said, we just had an engine failure. I said, I was communicating with another helicopter. I said, what's going to happen is they're going to overfly the top of us, but they don't have a hoist or anything, so they're not going to be able to do us any good. They're just going to fly over the top of us, and then I'm not sure where it comes next, right? So I instructed him to I skipped the part. Oh, I'll get back to it. I'm floating on the water now. This is my first time landing a helicopter on the water. So
nice landing, by the way.
It was, but I don't put it down. I'm going to come back to that because there's a lot of luck involved that day. So I don't know how long it's going to stay upright, right? So I look in the back, and at the time we used to keep a life raft under the seat in the back. So I pull it out, and I asked this guy to pull it out, and I said, hey, what we're going to do is I'm going to inflate that life raft, and I'm going to ask you to get in it. And then I'm just going to sit here and hold on to it. And if the helicopter rolls over, I'll jump in it, right?
Yeah.
So, but I want to get you in it now. So, because again, he was not an athlete. Yeah. Standard size in the Gulf of Mexico, but not an athlete.
Not an athlete.
So he gets in it. This was a day of learning, so where you don't know what you don't know. I didn't know how to inflate the life raft. I was like, I've never done that before. So I was like, we're looking at it, trying to figure this out. And I was like, well, we see a tether, we pull it out. And I say, just hold on to that. I said, and then throw the life raft in the water. And I wasn't sure if it was water activated. I said, I think if it doesn't inflate that way, just pull that. And then he pulls a pin, the thing inflates, right? Yeah. So now I know how those things work. So I tell him get in. He gets in, and he's getting a little bit. He's clearly not feeling well, you know. So he's turning green, and again, he's just had a traumatic event, and he's now sitting in a raft like he's bobbing and everything. It wasn't high seas, but it was still like 2 foot seas or something like that. So
and
in
you're
a raft,
in a raft. It's just
so he's getting sick, and I'm trying to keep him entertained, keep his mind off it. I start talking about food and all this sort of stuff. And anyway,
I'm sure that was helping.
He looked like he liked to eat, So I figured that's a topic everybody likes, So I got to try and find some common ground. So he, as it happens, a stayed upright the whole time, and a Sea Corps vessel pulled up. So we're 14 miles off the beach in Fushan. This is a shipping channel, so like there's plenty of traffic, plenty of sea traffic around.
Yeah.
So I see a Sea Corps vessel, and like I said, or we discussed, this company is now owned by Sea Corps. So Sea Corps vessel pulls up. They put a little fast rescue craft in the water. These guys pull up. They pull my passenger onto that small rescue craft. And then I have to get into the boat, and they're kind of reaching for me, and I was like, "Just why don't you guys just back up, and I'll just jump from the back to the boat." So I jump from the back of the boat, from the back of the helicopter into the boat, and then off we go. I don't remember how I got onto the ship, like if it was a ladder or a Billy Pew or what they did. But anyway, we find ourselves on the ship, and we're downstairs, and I've never been on a workboat before. This is the Sea Corps vessel Washington, motor vessel Washington. And I'm on the phone with the captain of the ship. And so when I'm talking to him, it's kind of breaking up and everything. I said, "Hey, I don't know protocol. Like, am I allowed on the bridge? Like, can I just come up and talk to you? This might be a little bit easier." He goes, "Oh, yeah. Why am I doing this? Just come up to the bridge." So I go up to the bridge, and everybody that was on the little fast rescue craft, everybody on the bridge is covered in tattoos. So I'm like, "Hey, this is my people, right?"
Hey, that's right.
Yeah. So now we're just like talking about tattoos and this sort of stuff, and I'm not really shitted up. Like, to me, everything worked out, and this is one of my features, is I'm not easily alarmed. So you find this sort of stuff out, like nobody knows how they're going to react in certain situations, you know. So anyway, I kind of do, so because I'm consistent with a couple. I've not had a great, like, for a very long time, I've had more engine failures than you should have had. I've had stuck collective. I've had no tail rotor problems, but like I've had a lot of hiccups in helicopters. Right. Like for a while, like there's service bulletins and ADs and shit that have got my name on them. You know? Not really, but that's how they all come from, right? Yep. So and I don't know why I was saying that. But anyway, we're on the ship. I'm not shitted up. I'm like, this is cool. Like, now this is a new experience for me. Like, I've never been on a ship before. I'm like, I'm getting to see all this sort of stuff.
Can I drive?
No, well, I'm talking to them about that stuff, and they're talking about how it's like there's a chart out, and there's a sextant on the chart, and I was like, whoa. I'm like, you guys still use sextants? And they're like, no. I don't know. They're like, full disclosure, we don't know why that's there. All this shit is GPS held and stuff, you know, and they had these little bow thrusters and all this sort of stuff so they can hold position and all this stuff. So I'm talking to them, and now they're like, well, I'm like, I don't know what happens now, right? But I asked them, I was like, so you're Sea Corps, right? Like, did you get a call from the company that this happened? Like, no, we were just on our way in, and we saw an orange helicopter floating. And so one bit of advice to the kids out there, if you're gonna ditch a helicopter, make it a bright orange helicopter.
Yeah, right.
Yeah. So Sea Corps didn't call them. They just saw us, came over, picked us up. And now the phone calls are coming in, like with Sea Corps, with chief pilot and all that sort of stuff. Yeah. And so what they decided to do was they wanted to tie off to that helicopter and bring it in to the beach somewhere. So the captain of the ship, again, I don't know his name, but he was like, hey, because I was talking with the chief pilot at the time. He's like, see if he'll tie off to that helicopter. The guy's like, nope, not doing that. And he's like, okay, cool. Errol, the chief pilot, he's like, okay, cool, fine. He's not tying off to it. We'll call you back in a little bit. Calls me back, says, we got another boat that's on the way. They're going to tie off to the ship, but they probably don't know as much about where to tie off a helicopter as you do, because I've got a lot of experience towing helicopters at sea. So
pun intended.
Yeah. So I'm like, they're like, well, but still I probably would know more, but I mean, maybe not. So they were like, we want you to get off that boat, get on the other boat, tie off to the helicopter, and bring it back in. I was like, yeah, okay, that's cool, because again, I don't make good decisions. So the captain of the boat was like, he said, give me the phone. He said, hey, 2 things aren't happening today. He said, I'm not tying off to that helicopter, and this guy isn't doing a ship-to-ship transfer. He's like, he's been through enough. He's like, so I will take him to any platform, any rig in the Gulf of Mexico. I'll take him to any port of your choosing. He goes, but those 2 things are not happening. So you tell. Yeah. So I was like, you just made my Christmas card list.
2 in one day.
2. Boom! What a day, you know? Like, I don't know if you know this about me. My Christmas card list is short. So anyway, I was like, fuck, dude, that's awesome. You know, like, I appreciate that. Like, anyway, so I'm now on the bridge of the ship, and they still don't know where I'm going, but I'm playing with all this stuff on the bridge, asking these questions, just tooling around, and the other ship shows up, and they start backing up to the helicopter. The captain is like, hey, you may want to see this. Your helicopter's only got about another 30 minutes, because he knows exactly what's going to happen. It's going to roll over. And I was like, I don't remember, I was talking with somebody about something. I'm like, oh, that helicopter? I'm like, fuck that helicopter. I'm like, that helicopter and I do not get along. I'm like, I don't give a shit about that helicopter. It's not my helicopter, right?
Yeah.
So they pull up, they roll it over, and on
purpose or by accident?
No, by accident.
Okay.
Not on purpose. On purpose. So they roll it over, and then now we're heading back to Fushan. And I had Sprint at the time. So
name drop.
My phone had one mode. It was paperweight mode. There was no coverage in Sprint, right? So we're getting
paperweight mode.
Yeah. So
that's great.
We're getting towards the beach, and somebody else is talking on their cell phone. The same guy's talking to me earlier. I said, hey man, I'm sorry. Can I call my girlfriend? I'm like, because I'm not sure how she's going to be, right? So she's my emergency contact. So the guy's like, yeah, here, make a phone call. So I call up Nicole, my then girlfriend, my now wife, mother of my child, mother of my second child next day or two. So
which congratulations.
Thank you very much.
So Quinn is still a good name.
Quinn's still in the running.
It's still in the running. All right, just checking.
If Liv doesn't work out, it's going to be Quinn. Yeah.
And that's on the record.
It's on the record, exactly. Yeah.
Nicole, think about it.
Yeah, just think about it. So I call her up and I said, I said, hey, baby, how's your day going? And she starts telling me about her day. And she's a speech pathologist in the school system, so she's got stuff to complain about, right? So she tells me about her day, blah, 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 and she says, well, how's your day? And I said, well, baby, I said, the first thing I'm going to tell you is I'm perfectly okay. I'm perfectly okay. I said, but I'm standing on the bridge of a ship looking at my helicopter upside down in the water. I said, I had an engine failure, and I had to ditch. I said, but as you can see, I'm on someone else's phone. I don't know what this is costing them, so I just wanted to call you in case, check to see if you I didn't explain it to her. I just said, I just want to tell you about it. So I hang up, and if you're paying attention, what I didn't tell her is that I landed upright and that I didn't even get my feet wet, right? Like, she's picturing me fucking upside down in a helicopter because that's what I just told her. And she's picturing me like having to cut out of my seatbelt and gasping for air and all that shit. And I'm on a ship playing with toys, So I get back to the beach and I call her from my phone and she's upset, understandably.
Oh my gosh.
And she's going through, now I got time to explain the story to her a little bit more. And you were going back and forth about all this sort of stuff. And she's like, what went through your mind? And I was like, so when I was convinced that I had the engine failure, right? And this is a thing. It's like, you have to convince yourself that this is happening. This is a human factor thing. It's like, guys, you you can rationalize a lot of stuff. Again, like even with the engine P, I was like trying to make that connection, right? So anyway, engine P stands for engine pressure. It was engine oil pressure. So that's there was, as it turns out, there was some O-ring that had like swollen or something like that, and it cut off oil to some, something further downstream. But that reduction in oil pressure, when it gets below like 1.4 bar or something like that, the engine has a switch where it shuts itself off. So
it doesn't burn up, it sees up, and
it's just part of the shutdown. I think it's part of the shutdown process. Like, so that if you're, I don't know, I'm not an engineer, but that's what I always thought it was. But here's the thing: we didn't find out about that until that engine was on a rack after the engine failure being inspected. So but anyway, engine P is engine oil pressure, lost engine pressure. That's why the engine shut down. And so she was asking me. When I entered the auto rotation and I had the low rotor horn, that's when I blew my floats. And so blowing the floats, this is another thing that as pilots, I've had discussions with people at various points of like, when do you blow the floats? So some people are of the impression that you would want to blow the floats early so that the helicopter is in a stabilized position before, like on the descent, as opposed to when you're very busy at the end with a flare. And some guys would say that's what you would do, is you would wait till you're in the flare, blow the floats. In the helicopter we fly now, it actually says wait till you touch down and let them self-inflate, right? So things you don't know, right? So because I was speaking, I remember talking with I can't remember his name, but he's a kid that eats, sleeps, and shits helicopters. David Bailey is his name. Yeah, David Bailey. He worked here. I worked with him at primary flight school, worked him at ERA, and worked with him here. So a lot of respect for David Bailey. Wealth of knowledge. And again, eats, sleeps, and shits helicopters. Like, he's the type of guy that you can at any point talk with him about anything in helicopters, and he can have an intelligent conversation because he was probably researching it the night before, right? So anyway, so he was saying that he would blow the floats early, and his logic was that if the floats don't fully inflate, you know that early. And I was like, okay, and again, next level thinking type stuff, but made the impression upon me that should the need ever arise, I will blow the floats early. So during this event, went from 500 feet, fat, dumb, and happy, to engine P, thinking, why, with a silly French, why would they put engine chip? To, oh shit, I'm in an auto, big bang, low rotor horn, now I'll pop, shouldn't I? So I pop the floats, and I'm descending towards the water, and I start to flare, right? So you descend at a certain speed, you're trading airspeed, which is just momentum and potential energy with what you're flying at altitude. You're trading these energies to keep the rotor spinning, and then before you touch down, you have to touch down slow. So you flare, you pull back on the cyclic, you load the disc, it keeps it increases the rotor blades, the lift, and then you cushion and set down. And that flare, cushion, and set down is a delicate maneuver. Like that's where most people fuck it up. And so I now am at that point mid-flare making a mayday call, and which is blocked or whatever again, and I look out and I think to myself, oh fuck, I'm too high. I'm like, fuck, I'm gonna die. Like, for that split second I was thinking, I'm dead, and then because I just had a low rotor horn as well, so now what I did was I started to level the helicopter with the collective bottomed out, and as I'm leveling the helicopter, I'm looking up at the blades because I just had a low rotor horn. Some helicopters mute the low rotor horn when the collective is full down, so you could have a low rotor but you don't know it. I don't know enough about this helicopter to say that is, like, I do or do not have a low rotor at this point, but I know I did a couple seconds ago. So
You did it about 400 feet.
Yeah, exactly. Just a little bit ago, I had a low rotor horn. So now I'm flaring. I'm coming off the flare. I'm going to level, and I'm looking up at the rotor blades, and I'm thinking peripherally, I'm going to look at the water. And I'm going to wait and cushion as late as I can watching the blades, because if the blades stall, when blades stall, they come down fast, right? And so they go either through the tail boom or through the cockpit, right? Ooh. So I'm looking at this like waiting and holding for the pull, and I'm flaring, and I feel this just kind of fall off the edge, and I just pull the collective, and then the next thing you know, I'm just bobbing. And I was like, softest touchdown of the day. So, and by like, water is very forgiving, right? And so there's all these things that people talk about, landing between the swells and all this sort of stuff. And I'm like, no. In order to land between swells are caused by wind, right? Right. So you want to land into the wind. So if you're landing into the wind and the swells are then coming at you, if you zero it out with a swell, that means that you are now moving backwards. Right. Like, you may still have indicated airspeed, but now you are physically moving backwards. That's something you haven't done before. And then now you're supposed to land with the engine off. Like, that's a lofty expectation. Anyway, I had 2-foot seas or whatever it was. I mean, they're bumps. There was nothing, right? So that wasn't an issue for me anyway. And again, luck was with me, and I landed, and everything was fine. So, but again, it's kind of a surprise to me that it all worked out, but I was very happy that it did. So we move on, and then I'm talking to Nicole, and she was like, were you scared? And I was like, well, actually, now that you mention it, no, I was pissed. When the engine quit, I muttered like motherfucker or something to myself, like something with the word fucking it for sure. Because I'm thinking, the one question I have on the interview is, can I not fly EC-120s? Yep. Like, I never wanted to fly this helicopter. Now, the very first day I'm flying this helicopter on a line, the fucking engine quits. I'm like, you have got to be shitting me, right? Like, so now I'm just angry, right? Yep. And then then we get to the flare. Yep. And I think I'm gonna die, and I don't, and I'm like, okay, that, everything's cool, and then we move on. And so Nicole asks me, she's like, and I told her, I said, look, and I mean this, like, and she knows this about me, if I ever get killed in a helicopter accident, know that I was angry. Like,
the last thing,
I was pissed. Yeah. Like, I don't get scared, I get fucking angry. So
I'm not far off with you. Like, with stuff that happens in the aircraft, you're like, really?
Yeah.
Really?
Yeah. I'm Italian Irish too, so I've got a bit of a temper. And my father used to hit me, so it was like I used to say that all the time. This
kind of interview.
Oh, is it? I'm not going to admit to being an alcoholic. I was an altar boy. Yeah.
Whoa.
I've had my share of priests. But so anyway, I told her, I said, just rest assured. I said, if this gives you any solace, any peace of mind, if I get killed in a helicopter, I'm going to be angry. So she's like, well, what did you think of? And
she was hoping for the romantic, I was thinking of you all the way in. And my last thought was you.
So,
love you, honey.
So I told her the truth. Star Wars Episode 3 was... Star Wars Episode 4... Which was Star Wars? Star Wars as a kid was Episode 4.
3...
was
4, 5, 6.
4, 5, and 6.
Yeah.
So Episode 3 was about to come out, right?
Yeah.
So for me, I thought in the flare, as I was thinking I was going to die, I'm thinking, fuck, I'm going to miss Episode 3. Now...
Oh my God!
I've told you the story, right?
Yeah.
Do you know why I thought Episode 3?
No.
Okay, so this is a funny thing, right? So my dad, I've got an older brother, a younger sister, 2 younger sisters. And my older brother, we're Irish twins. We're 11 months apart. So for July, we're the same age, right? So, and then I got a younger sister. She's 13 months younger than me, and then another who I call my baby sister, but she's in her 40s. Anyway. My dad, he was a lawyer, hardworking guy, and he had 4 kids. He took us to and this is in the 80s, right? Like Star Wars. How old are you?
I don't know, 43.
You're 43. Okay,
Yeah,
so Star Wars was a big thing to you as a kid, right?
Yeah.
Oh,
yeah. No, Star Wars is huge.
So for me, I was born in 72. Like Star Wars, I think is 79. Like as a 7-year-old kid, like Star Wars was like
it was the biggest thing ever.
Biggest thing ever, right?
Yeah.
So we're watching Star Wars, and I look over, and my father was asleep. Okay, didn't think anything of it. A couple months later, he dies of a heart attack, and so I always felt bad that he never saw Star Wars. Like for whatever reason, that like stuck in my head because it was such a big thing to me.
Yeah.
I remember he fell asleep, and I was thinking, like we played Star Wars, like lightsabers or whatever. And I felt bad. He fell asleep during Star Wars. Now, fast forward to me as an adult with a kid, and I realized he just needed to get some fucking sleep. Like
he put the kids in front of the TV.
He's not trying to watch.
Just watch this.
There wasn't YouTube. There wasn't any of that stuff. He's just trying to catch. He's trying to catch a break, so he doesn't care about Star Wars, right? But now I'm facing my own mortality, and I'm thinking. I think that's why I thought, oh shit, I'm going to miss episode 3 was because of that.
Wow.
Now, but I persevered through Jar Jar Binks in 1. I saw 2, and I'm like, God, if I just don't see 3, now I don't even see any of the movies anymore. But Nicole, so this is it. I'm like, she's like, what went through your mind? I'm like, oh, if I get killed, I'm gonna miss episode 3. And she's like, exactly. She's like, you didn't think of me? And I was like, well, who'd you think I was gonna take to the movies with me, baby? And
of course it was her.
Of course it was her. Yeah.
Come on, honey.
She didn't buy it. Again, I'm a bullshitter, but I didn't sell it that day. Yeah.
It's all good. I mean,
but so lessons learned from that.
Yeah.
I tell people this all the time. A couple years later, I was involved in a deposition. I think I'm free to talk about it. So the passenger sued. Now, the passenger sued the helicopter company, right? And there's a lot of lawsuits that are going to go around. Helicopter is now totaled, right? Because that other boat rolled it over. Right. So the company appoints me a lawyer the day before you do prep where they talk about what's appropriate to say and like the conduct of like I've never been to a deposition, so they give you like just general things. And one of the things they tell you is if you do not know 100%, you need to be clear about that. So like your name is Christopher Gator Gellene. Yeah. Were you wearing white socks that day? Like
I don't know.
I don't recall. Yeah. So like that's the number one answer. It's like by default, like if you have any doubt, and I'm a very logical person, like there's doubt for a lot of things. Like, but you're going to come up with in a lot of instances I don't recall. Anyway, that sort of stuff. So now we're in the deposition, and there's the lawyers on the opposite side, and they're going through my involvement in the totaling of this helicopter, and they pull out the flight manual in the emergency procedure section, and they start reading it, and they're just going to go verbatim, and they said something to the effect of, again, it's 10-15 years or whatever it is from when this accident occurred. You're flying along and the engine quit. Did you lower the collective to maintain rotor RPM? Yes. Did you adjust pedals to maintain trim? Yes. Did you adjust cyclic to maintain, and again, 70 knot attitude?
Yeah.
Approximately. And they're going through all these steps, blah, blah, blah. At this altitude, did you do a cyclic flare, touchdown, blah, blah, blah. And then it goes to the emergency shutdown, and they say, did you close the throttle? And I did not close the throttle. And they said, you didn't close the throttle? And I was like, nope. And they start conferring to themselves a little bit, and they said, why didn't you close the throttle? I was like, well, the engine was already off, and I don't know what caused the engine failure. So for me, there was no benefit in closing the throttle because I don't know if now I'm going to screw something up in the fuel control linkages or whatever. So I'm like, the engine's off, I'm going to turn the electrical system off, and I'm going to preserve the scene more or less is what I was thinking.
Yes.
And they confer amongst themselves. They tell me I'm free to go. And I'm thinking to myself, this is another thing, is your perception is an interesting thing. Because I'm walking out of that room, like I'm ushered out. I'm thinking, did this guy just win the lottery? Like, did he just win a lawsuit because I didn't close the throttle?
Yeah.
Like, I'm thinking that's crazy.
Yeah.
But you're taught, follow the checklist.
Yes.
Like, do what that says, right? And I'm thinking to myself, like, whatever. Like, it's okay, you know. And then, but I think it's crazy. And my lawyer comes up and he said, you did an excellent job in there. And I was like, okay. He's like, you did an excellent job. And I was like, okay. He goes, do you know what they were going for there? I'm like, I have no idea what just happened in there. And he's like, what they were going with was that you got a chip light, you panicked, you closed the throttle, and you caused your own engine failure. So exactly the thing I didn't want to do is what they were thinking I did, right? Now, one of the things it never really came up in conversation, and I always was embarrassed by it because of my lack of knowledge. Because remember I said I couldn't make heads or tails of the aircraft instrument?
Right.
When I raised the collective to see if I could fly out of it, like that didn't demonstrate knowledge of the aircraft. Like, and I was thinking, even when I found out later it was the engine P, like, I could have missed the engine oil altogether on the pre-flight. Like, I didn't know the helicopter. Like, for all I knew, I was flying around all day with no engine oil.
Oh,
right?
Yeah.
So I'm like, I never got to see it again. So I was like, wasn't sure if it was me. Like, you know, you have all the self-doubt, all this sort of stuff.
Yeah.
Anyway, it never came up under any official conversation about me raising the collective and flying out of it. It never got brought up. So had I brought that up in like the NTSB or the FAA investigation or whatever, it would have been through that evidence they would have known the engine was off, because you don't get a low rotor horn by raising the collective, and it wouldn't be intermittent. And I didn't enter the auto rotation because of the low rotor horn. I did it because of the bang and the kick and the other shit. You know?
Yeah.
So anyway, they were like, because I didn't close the throttle, the lawsuit went away. So it was really interesting to me that now, again, how the whole story like was like a M. Night Shyamalan thing for me, where it's like, this guy hit the lottery? Like, wait a second, you're patting me on the back? Like, what did I miss, you know? And it turns out, because I did not follow the emergency procedure, that lawsuit went away. So it's a lesson of like, you don't, the flight manual and all this sort of stuff doesn't cover every scenario. And you also have to think, unfortunately, in that we're in a litigious society. Like, your actions are going to be scrutinized.
Oh yeah.
Like, and sometimes right or correct isn't right, you know, like, so it was one of the lessons I learned from this, and I like to tell people about that. And I remember at the time, a bunch of pilots at Era, because again, I'm brand new. The day before, I was persona non grata because I showed up so fucking late, right? And then now all of a sudden, I'm like, oh, you did a fucking excellent job, blah 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 blah. And it was funny too. The part I didn't say was that that engine failure actually occurred on Friday the 13th.
Oh, so, convenient.
Yeah, conveniently. So like when the newsletter came out, Neil Osborne was the CEO or whatever at the time. He started by saying, he goes, now I am not normally a superstitious man, but on Friday the 13th, blah, 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 landed without incident and all this sort of shit. But anyway, 3 years later, again, nobody got hurt. Aircraft rolled over because the other ship tied off to it. Like, as far as the FAA is concerned, I landed on the water. Everything was off. My passengers and I disembarked. That's the end of it from the FAA standpoint, right? So there was no, no accident. But the ship, my lawyer afterwards, like, because the AI flying over the top, AI, and I forget his name, but you know who he is. He's a young kid. Same thing. He started as a fueler in Fushan, and then he wound up being the 225.
Oh, yeah, that guy.
You're talking, he was the co-pilot in the 412 that took pictures of the helicopter upright. Now, Just like that video I showed you earlier that you didn't know existed, the lawyer didn't know those photos existed of the helicopter upright, and I was telling him about it. He did not want to know or hear about those photos.
Wow.
So I don't know what other shit was going on with that, but again, you don't know what you don't know. But,
wow.
Yeah, so, but lessons learned with all that stuff, you know? So
the biggest thing that I had learned out of that with you was really being called on the carpet. I'm going to call it, for military wise, you're up in front of somebody, you're defending yourself. Did you follow the checklist? Did you do what you're supposed to do? And that's what I got out of that with you and just all of our conversations, because you have to be able to justify your actions.
You have to defend your
absolutely.
And a lot of people have said that, you have to look at, worst case scenario, whatever. It's like, can you defend your actions, whatever it is that you did, So is what you did defendable, and sometimes the answer is no, know, and sometimes, the answer needs to be yes more often than not, and I think if you go into things with that thought process, it helps you make good decisions,
I totally agree. Yeah. And I'm not saying that everybody should just go start hot dogging and doing whatever, because I can justify this. No. There's training and there's rules set in place for a reason.
Here's another story.
Go ahead.
About another engine failure I had. So the first engine failure I had was the first engine failure I had was funny. There was a guy who was Navy personnel, right?
Okay.
And he flew in the back of a helicopter a bunch, but he always wanted to fly one. He always wanted to take the flight controls, right? But he wasn't like an active back-ender like you. He was like Navy personnel, like he had been transported in a helicopter.
Got it.
Right.
So he's a passenger.
He's a passenger. Yeah. He's a passenger. Yeah. So, but he really liked helicopters. So he read up on them, and at the flight school I was at, the low time guys, because you're sitting around, students, you do the tours or the intro flights or whatever. So this guy books an hour flight. Most people do 30 minutes. He booked an hour. And so he takes an interest, and I'm talking to him about, stuff, and he knows aerodynamics. He asked me about settling with power or something like that. Like he's read up on helicopters, and he asked me if I ever had to do a forced landing, and I was like, well, we practice for it a lot. My instructor, Damian McEwen, prick, he had me doing, he cut throttles on me everywhere, So anyway, I'm like, I said, I
rule
practiced.
Number 6, don't be a prick.
Yeah, exactly. No, but like you practice them all the time, right? So I said, no, I've never had to do one. Let's go fly, right? So now we get in a helicopter. We fly around, coming up on the end of the hour. We go back to the airport. And like we flew a confined area, flew them up and down the river, stuff like that. Let them take the flight controls. And then we get to the airport. We got an extra 10 minutes or whatever it is. I said, you want to see a precision auto rotation? I said, I can show you. I said, I can't, I got to bring the engine on. But I said, I can show you an auto rotative descent to a spot. He goes, yeah, let's do that. Cool. Get clearance from tower to take off, and it's runway 36, and we're on a spot that's adjacent to the runway. Okay. So you when you take off, you kind of challenge a tree line to get up to traffic pattern altitude. And as soon as I cross the tree line, the helicopter starts shaking like shit. So I dump the collective, do a little lateral thing to the side, I flare, and I touch down right next to the runway, right? And I look at my passenger. This is the first time I've had to do this, and I was like, you okay? And he goes, yeah. He says, are you okay? I say, yeah, I'm fine. And I look at him. I'm like, this is your fault, right? And he's like, yeah. He's like, after I said it, I was like, I shouldn't have asked you that before we went flying. I was like, yeah, in the future, don't do that.
Yeah. Wait until it's after the flight.
Yeah. So, but I landed on the side of the runway, and what had happened was one of the cylinders had popped. It exploded, So I didn't have a full engine failure, but I lost power, and I auto-rotated to the next side of the runway. No harm done, right?
Right.
So as a guy used to say, I reverted to storytelling mode, right? So now I'm there saying there I was 20 minutes ago.
Yeah.
And every pilot that I talked to came up and asked me, well, why didn't you do this? Did you have to do that? Blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, I just want to be clear. There's nothing wrong with that helicopter. Yep. you can go fuck yourself. Like if there's nothing, another event with a guy I flew with, this guy named Chris Schleppers. He also phenomenal guy. He's one of these guys with like photographic memory, like the opposite of me. Anyway, Chris was one of my students. He's funny because when I first took him on for the JA students, we were talking about this earlier, how when you have a JA student, the FAA students, FAA flight training, you practice simulated engine failures. You roll the throttle. You're in flight. You take a throttle. You roll it to idle. You do that auto-rotative descent. You flare, and then at the last second, you bring the engine back in, and you wind up hovering. For the British system, they have to see 10 engine off landings before they can solo. And an engine off landing is at that last second, you don't bring the engine on, and you just touch it down at idle. So it's again, a more delicate maneuver. So I'm a brand new JA flight instructor. Chris Schleppers is one of my students, and one of the first engine off landings I showed to him, that landing was not a secret. We slammed into the ground, hopped up, kind of rolled onto the left skid, touched down, and I was like, and that was an engine off landing. He was like, oh, okay, those are exciting. So he saw like some of my worst ones, right? So for him, we're flying, and again, lesson learned. There was a flight instructor named Guy Fedor who he was a mechanic as well. At our Monday morning CFI meetings or Wednesday, whatever it was, we always had a topic, and Guy one day said, when you guys start up the helicopter and you have to do a freedom of movement for the flight controls, which is you undo these frictions and just make sure the flight controls are free to move. Yep. He said, you do the cyclic, collective, and pedals. He goes, does anybody do the throttle? And really, nobody did at that time. He said, well, what do you do with a stuck throttle? And everyone's like, I don't know what I do with a stuck throttle, because that's not something that was in the emergency procedures checklist or whatever. So if you have a stuck throttle, that means you got fixed fuel flow. So with the collective, if you raise the collective where you need more, you're asking more of the engine, the rotor will then droop. Right, and that's what creates lift. If you lower the collective, now you're asking less of the engine, but it's fixed output, so it's going to cause that rotor to increase. Yeah. And there's operational limits, so you can overspeed the rotor. And if you overspeed the rotor, you got to go talk to Todd.
We don't want to talk to Todd.
We don't want to talk to Todd. But this is a real event, right? So like a real event, limits are for normal operations. Right. But at the time, guys, like the only thing you can do is shut the engine off. And I was like, because if you raise the collective, the rotor droops. You lower the collective, the rotor overspeeds. He said, so the only thing you can do is shut the engine off. And I was like, and that stuck with me. So from that point on, I taught all my students, check the throttle, this is why, blah, blah, blah. So now fast forward to we're doing confined area training with Chris. We're in practice area 1. And he looks at me and he says, are you restricting the throttle? And I looked at him with my hands folded in my lap, and I said, nope. And he said, I can't move the throttle. And I said, okay, well, let me see it. And I take the flight controls, and I cannot move the throttle. And he turns and looks at me like as if I was going to hit him. And he's like, I checked it on start. Because, he was at the point in his training that he could start the helicopter by himself. Then, the instructor didn't have to be there for that. And it helps guys with their self-confidence, nobody's overlooking them and all this sort of stuff. Yeah. And just as a flight instructor, you fly with a lot of guys through the day, so if you don't have to sit through every startup, it's nice, So you don't get to witness what they do in the start. So he confirms that he did indeed check it, but here we are flying around and we have a stuck throttle. So now I'm a little bit into my JA flight career, and I'm actually comfortable with doing engine off landings. I'm very proficient with them at this point. Yeah. And so I fly back to the airport and I contact Tower and I tell them the helicopters in this airport, and this is one of the reasons they moved to this airport, it was a weekend flyer airport. Like, it wasn't very busy. Helicopters are the major operator, and you could have 6 helicopters in the traffic pattern at any given time. 6 helicopters in one traffic pattern that's dense.
Yeah.
And we did not operate from the runway, so we were parallel to the runway.
Yeah.
But anyway, I'm flying in, and I know I want the runway. There's a fixed wing guy in the traffic pattern, and I told Tower, I said, look, I didn't want to draw attention to myself because I was like, I just didn't think I wanted to do that. So I intentionally did not declare an emergency.
Okay.
So, and the thing that flashed through my head at the time is I got a friend named Steve Copeland, and Steve was he was one of the,
Steve, by the way.
You know Steve, yeah, exactly.
I do know Steve.
Yeah, you know Steve.
Yeah.
So small industry,
small world.
So Steve was a student. I did a commercial stage check with him. Like he wasn't my student, but he like I was an instructor while he was a student.
Yeah.
I did one like mid-evaluation kind of thing on him. And one of the things that impressed me about Steve was he was no nonsense. Like what I really liked was I gave him a task and he didn't hum and haw and, well, do you want me to, or I've never done this. He just got on with it, right? And that is a trait that I respected in Steve. And anyway, Steve was taken off in the same type of helicopter in Orlando, and he had a tail rotor drive shaft failure on takeoff. So he had to auto-rotate, and he auto-rotated into the back of a loading dock. And the funny part about this, I mean, incredibly impressive to do this, right? Like,
yeah.
And he's flaring, and as he was flaring through this dock, he looked over and made eye contact with a worker that was on the dock, and he just like nodded at him and then looked forward, touched down, and skids 3 feet, gets out of the helicopter and asks him for a cigarette. But because of where he was, I don't remember, he made a call or whatever it was, but he wound up on the news, right? Okay. And so I was like, I don't want to wind up on the news, so I'm just going to not draw any attention to myself, and I'm just going to communicate to Tower what's going on. I said, look, I'm flying in, I got a stuck throttle. I said, I am going to try and land with the engine running, but I don't know how to do that. I said, but I'm going to make an approach, but I need the airplane out of the traffic pattern. I said, because when I land, I'm going to be stuck on the runway. So I said, I'm going to try and do a landing with the engine on. I don't know how that's going to work. I said, and then if I can't do that, I'm going to shut the engine off and I'll be stuck on the runway. Roger. Airplane takes off. I do a high-speed traffic pattern, and I was like, we were doing confined areas, so I have cruise power applied. Okay. So I can't slow down. If I slow down, I'm going to have this ridiculous climb in altitude, and then I'm going to try and get to the backside of the power curve. It's not something we need to talk about while I'm climbing. Like it's a difficult thing to fathom. So I couldn't figure out how to do it. But I do know how to do engine off landing, so we do the second traffic pattern, and I tell Chris, when we cross the threshold, I want you to pull the mixture, pull the fuel valve, and then shut off the electrics. So what I didn't tell him was I should have told him, and again, a lesson learned after the after action stuff. I never told him to brace. I should have told him to do that.
Oh yeah. Well, you know what though? I mean, you would think. I mean,
never
for
hurts,
me,
never hurts.
No,
to tell.
you're right. It's that assumed.
Yeah, exactly, exactly. So
yeah.
So anyway,
and actually, I'll throw one more thing is because you and I fly front and back. You're in the front of the aircraft. There are times you and I talk about this quite a bit. Of if I give a head nod from the back of the aircraft, you don't see that. There's no communication there. So you have to say it.
You have to
don't
exactly. Yeah. Well. So anyway, so I added that brace. So we auto-rotate, we touch down, non-event. I put the electrical power back on and get on the radio, and Tower says to me, taxi to parking. And I said, I don't think you understand what I thought you understood. So lesson learned there is declare an emergency, because I am in a U.S. airport with an English speaker. I'm a single language speaker myself, so we both speak English as our first language. I thought I was communicating clearly with him as to what was going on, and clearly I didn't, because he was he told me to taxi to parking, right? So didn't understand the situation. So lesson learned, declare an emergency.
Yeah.
You know, and this comes down to the same thing like when we've discussed this in the back, like communication is a funny thing. Like the whole point is like if Peter Kelly and I used to say this, like if I tell you that clicking once means yes and clicking two means no, and we both understand that, that's effective communication.
Right.
Chances are not everybody's going to understand that. So when you come down to standard phraseology or whatever, like the first thing is to communicate, to express your thoughts or whatever it is. Because I remember, I can't remember the guy's name, but he kept tripping over taglines attached and taglines away.
No.
And I remember he would say taglines attached, taglines not attached or whatever.
Yeah.
And I remember talking to him afterwards. I was like, first, I understand what you're saying. So don't beat yourself up about it. Like, because he was like making it a thing. I said, we're still communicating. I said, so don't get yourself like big picture. We're communicating. Yeah. Don't stress about it too much. But when you get a chance, you pull your head out of your ass and fucking say the right words. But it's you know, again, lessons learned. Like declare an emergency. You cannot misunderstand that.
Right.
You know?
Right.
So when I touched down at that, same thing. Just a couple scratches on the middle of the runway. Nothing else done. Fortunately, and this was another one, Todd came out. When I landed from that one, I was thinking the same thing. What did I fuck up? Because like
I gotta go talk to Todd.
Yeah, like you just have this self-doubt of like, what did I do to cause this? And when I got out, I looked under the helicopter and the throttle linkage was just hanging attached to a cable. So I was like, yep, that's broken. That wasn't me. Like at least this was legitimate, you know?
Yeah.
Like, so same thing, I'm surrounded by my peers, and every single one of them starts with, why didn't you do this? Why didn't you do that? So the point of what I say with this is, at the end of everything, doesn't matter whether you've done the right thing or the wrong thing, you're going to be asked questions. And I would rather be able to answer why I landed prematurely or whatever it was than why I took a helicopter and turned it to a pile of parts. Because this industry is crazy with the Monday morning quarterbacking and people giving opinions on stuff, which again, even if they're best intention, they think they know what's going on. It's like, that's so easy to misinterpret stuff. Right. But I realized early on that it doesn't matter what you do, you're going to have to answer questions about it. But when you're sitting in front of a team of lawyers and you're being deposed, like, you, again, checklists and all this sort of stuff, like I in that particular instance, following the checklist was not the right thing to do. So it's you know, sometimes you do have to do what is the, again, like correct isn't right or whatever it is, you know. And again, could have been in a parallel universe that I didn't do the right thing and the guy did wind up you know, hitting the lottery or whatever it was.
It's a weird scenario and situation, and this is why I wanted to ask about it, because of that. And you know, there are so many things that we do is, you know, I want to call it standards, but at the same time you have to be flexible.
So a very wise man, Bob Watson, said plans are important. Or planning's important, but plans are meaningless.
Yep.
And so you plan and you prepare and then be ready to adjust.
Yep.
That's like, and this is the thing I think that I took away from everything is it's just in some instances a little bit of experience. So like where I was talking about the Mayday calls, right? Yeah. Like when you practice a Mayday call, like when I had the actual engine failure, the one I had to declare, it came out twice with very little effort because prior in my career I learned you practice Mayday calls. Yeah. And most people, the first time they say it isn't smooth. You know, it's the first time you get on a radio.
First time I get hoisting.
First time you get hoisting. You've heard people say it 1,000 times, but it's not smooth. The first time you practice it, it is like, what is going on? You know.
We're gonna get into that story in a minute, but yeah.
So you practice things, you know, and this is one of the things, like, again, maybe circling back, like when we talked about getting the SAR program started at ERA, like the lessons learned and the opportunities for improvement that presented themselves were like, you have to train, you have to practice, and you don't know what you don't know, and you think about, you know, We early on at Era, and this is going to seem like dirty laundry, but it's not. It's just the experiences you have, you know. There was somebody pointed out that we didn't have a CRM course at Era, right? And so CRM means a great many things to a great many people, right? Yeah. So somebody did a survey. He was an Alaska pilot. I forget his name, but he sent out a survey, and basically the survey went through like human factors type stuff, and asked, you know, like is a pilot likely to, you know, have great muscle memory from what they trained? Are they going to freeze up? Are they going to do this? Like there was some human factor type stuff, and you know, some sort of the psychobabble side of that side of CRM, right? Anyway, but it was just basically to get everyone's general knowledge. Like at the time, the questionnaire or whatever went out to everybody in the company. It went to single pilot guys, went to the crewed aircraft, it went to management. And so everybody fills it out. And at the time, all the single pilot guys were like, CRM, like what does CRM have to do with me? Right. And so this was really the purpose of the questionnaire was, do you understand what CRM is, and what you know, what do you think CRM is, right? Because we didn't have a program. So again, it goes out to all these people, and they were sent out in groups: single pilot, crewed aircraft, and management. And when the surveys came back, there were really right or wrong answers on this, even though it was sort of, you know, it's some of it could be seem opinion based, but there are still like surveys and things that are done. Like there were right and wrong answers to it. And they said, in these three groups, who do you think did the best on the CRM questionnaire?
You would assume the crewed.
Yeah, and the crewed did. And they said, who do you think did the worst?
You would assume the single pilots.
But it wasn't. It was management. Management did not really address the human factor. Right. So that's a glaring oversight because, and again, some people are clued into this, but like the aircraft is not the asset. The people operating it are the asset. You know, they're the weak link in it as well. Like they're the ones that have all of the frailties, like mechanical things, with the exception of EC-120s and throttle linkages on Schweitzers. Yeah. You don't have a lot of mechanical failures. Most of the failures and stuff do come down to pilot decisions, human error, right? We had a really great guy at Era in the training department at one time who basically sent out a newsletter and said, hey, we've looked at all of Era's incidents, accidents, and occurrences, and it turns out that, you know, people are to blame 80% of the time, and it like sounds controversial, which he kind of meant it to be, but he's like, but that should come as no surprise. Like that is the industry average. And so when somebody makes a mistake, again, like somebody misinterprets a rotor tach failure for an engine failure, that's understandable. Like there's a lot of things to process, and he wasn't trying to do that. Like no guy that goes out and has an accident plans to do it that day. Right. So that's the thing when it comes to the human factors and training and the things you learn, is a little bit of experience is really what makes the difference. You know, because then you can see things coming, you know, like, and that's the whole idea of like planning is important, but plans are meaningless. It's like you plan for this and, oh yeah, we've seen this before. We know what happens, you know. Management is usually the weak link in that. And that's, again, no disrespect to managers. No. It's just they don't know what they don't know, and they're in a position where they need to know, and there's a lot of assumed knowledge with what we do, like and a lot of it is misconception. So there's
now the other side of that. I'll throw this out too, and this is kind of industry standard, and not just our industry, but other areas as well, where you have people that have moved up through the ranks, like our guy Glenn. Yeah, so Glenn moves up through the ranks, and now, he goes from lineman to now pilot and then to management. And there are things you forget as you move up. So when you get into those management positions, you're seeing a bigger picture, a different picture, and you forget, like, oh yeah, that's what they're doing on the line.
Sometimes,
Yeah.
sometimes you forget, and sometimes you've just never done it.
True, very true. I don't want to take that away either.
There was a manager that I knew. I forget what his name is, but I took an issue with him because I roomed with him in Lake Charles. He was a lawyer by trade. Forget what his name was, but there's a rule when you're sharing space, like if there's something in the refrigerator that's not yours, you don't eat it.
Don't eat it.
I had half an onion, half a tomato that I cut in half. I put them together. I made myself a tamunion, and I was planning on eating that tamunion the next day. And this guy comes in and ate my damn tamunion. So, anyway, that aside, with the conversations I had with this guy, one of the things he said was like pilots don't make great managers, and he said the reason is they don't get management training. Right. And that's a very valid point. So when you take a look at a guy like Glenn, his strength comes from his depth of experience at the company, because he worked from a lineman to doing fuel, like he ran bags or whatever he did, and then he did fuel, then he became a pilot, and he started, I think, as a 76 co-pilot, then flew koalas, because I know he flew koalas and he had a very strong work ethic. Then he moved on and on up into whatever management position he is. So he has a depth of knowledge and that's a strength, and I think he probably is a good manager. Like I've always gotten along well with Glenn, but some managers that don't, like some of the best managers don't have helicopter experience.
Agreed.
However, they defer to the experience of their pilots and trust them as I hate these type of terms, but as the subject matter experts, right? And then you trust what those people have to say. It's very difficult to trust helicopter pilots. But like at some point you have to, like if those are the people that are operating your helicopter, like you got to trust that. It's weird. Like the companies go through audits. They bring in outsiders, which is fine. You need a third-party opinion on stuff, but sometimes they come in and tell you exactly what your guys are telling you, and you don't listen to your guys. It's weird, you know.
No, we ran into that all the time with the SAR unit. It was like they're selling stuff that they were really underselling us because we could do more than they were actually offering. We're like, yeah, and I remember a case that came up, and they were like, they're messaging out, hey, we've got a rescue swimmer, and the Coast Guard says, yeah, so do we.
Yeah.
But what the Coast Guard did not have was a full-on FPC paramedic sitting in the back that could do full-on triage with advanced medication and advanced life support. And it was like,
you don't know the capabilities. And
exactly.
So, and that is one problem. And then parallel to that, you've got thinking that the helicopter can go do anything. Like I remember on audits,
very
guys
true.
Would be like, "Oh, so you're all weather capable?"
Yeah,
nope.
No. Yeah,
we're not.
You're a crane in the sky. Well,
yeah, exactly.
Not really.
Yeah. And there's misconceptions or whatever it is. So, but the big thing is experience with it, and the more experience you have with that particular thing, the more you can sell it, and all that comes with it. So I guess we can.
No, it's good stuff.
Yeah.
Like I appreciate you sharing all that, because there's a lot of people that hopefully will never have to go through that. But in the possible chance they do, it's like, So now I'm going to fast forward.
Yeah.
All right. So now we're in the SAR program together.
Yeah.
We've been going for a little while now too.
I hope that's okay.
This is great.
With it, so
me neither. I want to say I feel bad for the listeners, but I don't.
No.
Oh, it's funny. So now we get together in the SAR unit, and there's a lot of things that I remember with you specifically. Or let me ask you this first. Now that you're in there, do you remember your first case?
I don't know that I remember my first case, but I remember an early case because it was with Pat Barber.
Okay.
I just remember him saying something that I thought was really odd. It was a night case, right? And it was raining or whatever. It wasn't a great night, but it wasn't like a horrible night or anything either, right? And I just remember it was a hoist case, and we had gone to a rig or whatever it was. We couldn't land there or whatever it was, so we're hoisting. And I remember Pat Barber went down, and because I don't know, was he a paramedic as well?
He EMT.
EMT, okay.
Yep.
So he went down, and because I'm used to him as a hoist operator, and he came back up, and one of the things he had said was while he was down, he goes, he it said like he left the helicopter, did what he did, turned around, looked up, and the helicopter was right where he left it. He was like, and that felt good. And I was like, awesome. Isn't that what's supposed to happen? And I just, for whatever reason, he goes, no, yeah, but it was really like you're just like steady right where you were. So it was like, okay, I thought that's what we were supposed to do, you know. Yeah, that was that for whatever reason early on. That's something some case I remember. So yeah,
that's pretty good.
Yeah,
I like that one.
Yeah.
Well, then we let's see. So then you and I had two particular, and one of them you were sitting left seat, and I know you and I talked about this offline, but you don't remember this, or you're very limited.
This is a feature I have.
Very little recollection.
Yeah, like if you tell me something, and this is just people, right?
Yeah.
So I'll remember details of nonsense, and then other things that should, like somebody would think, oh, do you remember when this thing happened to you? Like, I have no recollection of that. I just called, I caught Nicole in one of those too. I'm like, but you have to understand, like, you see, like people forget things. Yeah. I remember it in general the case because we were going to a jackup rig, and I remember we had the hover basically between the legs. I mean, we're just at leg level,
right?
And the deck itself was fouled. Like they just had a bunch of.
They were stripping that. They were deconstructing the rig, and there was somebody that was on there that was injured or whatever it was, had heart problems. But we had to hoist them off, and it was very interesting for me for that in particular case because I was a hoist operator. I had all three crew members in the back were prior U.S. Coast Guard rescue swimmers.
Okay, who else was on board?
So we had Pat Estrada.
Okay.
And then we had Dustin Scara.
PE.
Yeah, PE. Dustin Scara.
Okay.
And then myself.
Yeah.
Dustin was a paramedic.
Yeah.
PE was a swimmer. I was a hoist operator. And then we had you in the front left and Joey in the front right.
Yeah.
And the cool part for me coming up to that was it was a very benign hoist, and yet at the same time it was kind of difficult because of the elements
right in the middle
around
of the
it.
obstructions. So you, like everything, you have to balance like your height and your flyaway path.
Hoist.
It was a nighttime hoist, exactly.
You guys were under goggles.
Okay.
All right. We roll up, and it was matter of fact, this is the first time I had
I remember this.
Yeah, so we had done a rehearsal or a practice run, whatever you guys call it out there. It's your opportunity to go check it out, and then
it's a dry run.
Yes,
is what you do. Yeah,
yes,
just to make sure what you're planning is what is gonna work out.
The greatest part about it is that we went into the dry run, the rehearsal, got into position, and all of us decided at that point in time, are we good to go from here? Because we had like a 25 knot headwind, so everything was blowing behind us anyway. And it was confirmed, like, yep, let's go. And from there, it was a beautiful hoist right into the middle of everything, confined area.
It's funny sometimes how you, with experience, like you're just used to doing the same thing. So I think what we had done, because we had done some dry runs, not done some dry runs, and so at this point we were just kind of getting to the point where we really wanted guys to do a dry run
every time.
Then we decided that with this dry run, if you're in position, you don't need to go back to the rest and do the running again. You're already there. Everything's good. Go live now.
Right.
And that little change might seem obvious to somebody else from the outside, but it's one of those things where you didn't do it before, and now that you did, that subtle change in dynamic, sometimes it freaks people out.
Right.
Like people cannot deal with that change. Yeah. That's a problem with what we do because you're always going to have some thing that you have to deal with, and again, like for me, with the area I always came from is I want to have as easy a day as possible. So if I can find an easier way to do something, and it makes sense to do it, like to heck with what we used to do. Like if there's a reason for it, great. Like you have to respect why you do things. The more you understand the why, the easier it is to comply with stuff. But sometimes, every once in a while, you do something, you have to ask, well, why do we do that?
Yeah.
Does it not make more sense to do it another way? It's this constant state of improvement. Yeah. Some people have a very difficult time with change.
Yeah.
I, fortunately, am not. I think it's one of if I am going to pat myself on the back, it's one of my strong attributes is I am flexible and very objective, and I can make decisions very quickly, which is a little bit. You have to recognize your strengths and your weaknesses and realize, like, remember how I was saying, like, I just always consider myself the average pilot because all I can go on is my experiences. And one of the things I used to teach in the CRM class when I'd stand in front of everybody, I'd say, without a show of hands, you don't answer this question out loud, but who's the best pilot in the room, right? Everybody knows, right? It's me, right? Everyone thinks they're the best pilot in the room, right? So, but the reality is we are all, hopefully, average pilots.
Yeah.
Because the reality is, like, there's a lot, I mean, whatever it is, like the group of you probably are average. If you're not average, there's a strong chance you're below average. Like, right. You're not always, everyone thinks they're a superstar. And part of this is, a quote I like all the time, and I don't know who said it originally, but Robert the Koopman had attributed it to George Bush. But it's a phrase that says, we judge others by their actions and we judge ourselves by our intentions, right? And when you really process that, it's true.
Yeah.
And you can make excuses for what you do because you know what you meant to do. But you don't know what anybody else means to do. You can't get in their head, you know? So it's one of these things, again, like when somebody goes and has an accident, everybody thinks the worst of that person because you think they fucked up, blah, 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 this stuff. But that guy did not intend to do that. Right? But his training and everything he did, everything up to that moment, it made sense for him to do what he's doing. You know, good decision, bad decision, whatever it is. But it's like, it's one of those things. Everybody thinks they're better than they are, or whatever it is, you know. So, but my ability, like, because I make decisions quickly, a lot of other people don't do that. And the assumption I have of, like, where I can see something that I assume everybody else sees, and that's not necessarily the case. And this is why, like you're saying, the communication and all that sort of stuff, it plays that's a critical part in everything. Is that you can't have these assumptions.
Right? No, you can't. No, you got to be crystal clear. No, that's too far. You have to be clear enough where everybody understands.
Yeah.
And if there is not an understanding between two people, have a conversation.
Yeah. And you have to approach things, again, the definition of insanity is doing the same thing and expecting different results, right? So, like, if your technique doesn't work, then you shift to whatever the other technique is.
Exactly.
And so, like, this evening, evening of, like, hey, let's do a rehearsal.
Yeah.
You guys good from here? Let's just roll with it from here. That flexibility and the ability. Also, one of the things I remember about that night too was I didn't have any references. I'm just in the left seat, hanging out in the dark. You know.
I think you specifically looked over and all you could see was one of the legs to the jack up.
I could see one of the legs across the panel, but the top yellow portion of it. Yeah. On my side, I had nothing. Yeah. But I also was like, perfectly, like, everything is cool. That's not a comfortable place to be in if you do not know exactly what every other person's going to do, and that you're not comfortable with everybody's decision, you know. So that is something I do remember about that night. Was like, it's just another night hanging out in a hover in the middle of the pitch black in the Gulf of Mexico, you know, pulling somebody up off the middle of a foul deck. Like, there was no sense of like this is like, I'm like nervousness or anything, and it has to do again with you guys in the back and confidence in Joey and everybody knowing what's coming next, so there's no surprises.
And it was the whole scenario was great for me personally, because that was one of my I'm going to call it one of my harder hoist cases because of the confined area to get him into the spot. But in all reality, like, I look back at it, it was pretty benign. I mean, PE went down first. He landed right. As a matter of fact, I think he put his foot up on a crate or a whatever
Captain
was
Morgan
there.
did.
Yeah, and landed. He had a good landing, and then we had a tagline coming in or a guideline bringing, Dustin in, and everything was very controlled. And one of the dynamics of it going from the rehearsal right into it, because of the winds that were up, we had no worries. Yeah. If we had 0 wins, I think it would have been a different scenario, and we would have changed it. But again, that being adapted and overcome everything It was awesome, and I really enjoyed that case.
This is from what you're telling in that story too, though. Like for where you're saying it's benign, it was like, but it was a difficult hoist for you. This is also the difference between what we do in the front and what you do in the back. Is like what's easy for you, might be incredibly hard for us, and what might be hard for you, we're just like blissfully unaware of that up front.
I hit the hover hold.
Well, it comes down to, one of the things I had said was again, you don't know what you don't know. You go through, you self-assess whatever it is through your own experiences. And I remember what I learned the most from that SAR operation was when I rode the hook. Yeah. So, and the practice area we had in Galveston, we went to the bunker, and I think it was Inman it was either Inman or Barber who was the hoist operator that day. And I had been flying, I don't know, 6-8 months up front, you know, so we've done plenty of, flights and lots of training and had been, I know the calls, I know all the words, I know all this sort of stuff. But until I was on that hook in the back, being pulled from my back seat over to the skid, listening to you or John narrate what's going on, I'm like, oh, okay, this is what he means by, RS is on the skid, he's Orca's attached, Orca's away or whatever, and then he's halfway out, he's below the skid, all
That's
these
really
calls.
good. You've listened to this a lot.
Well, now that I've done it, I know what it means, but up until that point, I really didn't. And the other thing, as I said, I didn't know was how thin that cable is. Because until you're hanging on the outside of it, like looking at it like that is about a 1/4 inch or so. That doesn't look.
It's actually 3/16, but whatever. No, I'm just kidding.
It doesn't matter what it is. It looks thin. So, but again, going through that the same thing, my role and your role, we're there experiencing the same event, but we're not having the same experience. I'm doing, and that's again one of my big elevated level philosophies is perspective. Comes down to everything. We're there in the exact same scene doing two completely different things. So like what might be a difficult operation for you may be very easy for the guys up front, or vice versa. And then, of course, there's the times that it's very difficult for everybody. And when that occurs, it's nice for everybody to know that, like, this is a difficult event. So these are the potential risks, and that communication goes where it's most essential. I think when we're talking about how, experiences, the little experiences, the training event we did the other day, where we had a training exercise where we're simulating a vessel that was on fire, and we were going to be extracting a patient from that vessel. So
another vessel.
We're simulating it's going to be the vessel on fire, but the reality is we're pulling him off of a different vessel. And currently we're down. We're not staffed optimally for this, right? So they want us to do pull somebody out on a stretcher, on a backboard. And again, because they don't know what they're asking, they made the question. They asked, hey, this is what we'd like to do. And then we just told them we're not capable of doing that at the moment because we're down trained personnel. Again, the guy was fortunate that he had a little bit of experience, and he said, yep, he goes, we don't have anybody on our vessel that's ever done this before, and if you're saying you don't have the right personnel, then we're not going to do that. We're going to do something a little bit different, you know? And unfortunately, in a lot of situations, that's not what you get. You wind up with somebody who, like in backboard occurrences, to me, the things I always think about are the various
spins.
The spins, For whatever reason, there's multiple videos of 109s doing backboard operations. What from an outsider's perspective, you've got a very capable helicopter. A 109 is a great helicopter. You've got an experienced crew on board, clearly, because they're flying. I mean, I don't know the guys involved, but you've got a pilot that's hovering an appropriate position over the scene. You got a hoist operator who's tending to the line just fine, and you've got rescue personnel that are on the ground in flight suits and helmets, and they pick the guy up off the ground, and then the backboard starts spinning. And it spins, and it continues to spin and spin and spin. And what anybody who's done that before knows is it's very easy to correct. You simply move forward at 15 to 25 knots, and that spin goes away. That problem stops.
Stop hoisting for all you hoist operators. As long as it's not in obstacles, okay?
There are scenarios, of course. Yeah. So in these instances,
the bottom line
is a little bit of experience.
Yeah.
You can solve that, and I'm not dogging on those pilots. Their company asked them to go do something they hadn't done before, and they chose hope as their plan.
Yeah. Or they didn't have the proper emergency procedures set up.
Yeah, they didn't have a plan B, whatever it was. So and that little bit of inexperience, again, not in a negative way, they hadn't run into this before. They didn't know what to do, and they didn't have a playbook to go by. So this is, again, where now planning is important and plans are meaningless, but their planning broke down by, we've had it in a lot of instances, because this will come up in probably the other event that we shared together, was when you haven't gone and done something, but the company expects that you're able to go do it.
We're going to get that in 1 second, yeah.
So the ability to adapt comes from experience. Once you've gone through something and you've seen it with your own eyes, you can better process what that is. And so again, for me, riding the hook, like, I learned so much from that actual from being in the back. So anyway, yeah.
Well, the greatest part about that is, and you and I have talked about it offline many times over, is one of the recommendations for any pilot and that is going to do hoist operations to ride the hoist.
Yep. Yeah. I think there's, if you have more than one pilot in the program, then you're doing a distinct disservice to the whole flight if you don't ride the hook.
Agreed.
You just get a completely different perspective on what's going on. Even if you think you have a very clear idea, riding the hook just gives you that additional experience. And it comes in handy, because like in our current operation, like, we have some procedures that some of the experienced hoist riders don't enjoy, because they don't understand the differences of the airframes we've flown and all that sort of stuff.
Right.
But because I've ridden the hook, and from a 80-foot hover down to a work vessel offshore at night, I've done that. I've been on the hook, and I've done it several times. I know what I'm asking somebody else to do when I happen to be hovering at 45 feet doing an insertion or extraction or whatever it is.
Yep.
I have that firsthand experience. I know what it is, so I understand why somebody might be uncomfortable with it and realize how thin the cable is or whatever it is. But it helps to have that experience, because, like I was saying, even though I'm up front, you're in the back, we're at the same occurrence, we're not having the same experience if you're not doing the same thing. So I think riding a hook, absolutely, if you're a pilot in a hoisting program, get on the hook. I'm sure a lot of guys do, but if somebody doesn't, I hope so as well. Yeah. I haven't worked for a lot of different hoisting programs too, really. Right. So, but it helps. Yeah.
And this is like, and I talk training. Like, training is hard because training costs money. And a lot of companies, they might not have the training budget, or it's costing more than expected, or whatever the case may be. Even military, like, there's training.
Budget's always a constraint.
Always. And training seems to be one of the first things that you're like, well, maybe we can cut back on an hour here, maybe we can cut back on an hour there. But what happens is, and I'll throw myself under the bus, again, training. I had to learn how to be a hoist operator. I just so happened was with you when I was my first 2 or 3 times ever hoisting, and I remember specifically trying to con the aircraft in, and I'm forward right 40, forward right 20. Oh, I missed 30, forward right 30, forward right 20, and you guys were just laughing at me up in the front of the aircraft. And then I started laughing in the back, and I'm like, oh yeah, and hold, and the whole thing was just awful. It was a terrible hoist, and it was terrible conning, but it was training, and that brought me to where I'm at now, which is helped. And if you're going to ask a guy to do it, you got to train it. which is going to bring me to the next thing here.
You have to train it. And this is, again, where we're saying from the backboard events and all that sort of stuff. Yeah. They're setting out with a good intention. Like they want to go conduct a rescue. But if you haven't done the operation, the management expects that the pilot is going to make the right decision at the right time, but management or whoever it is has made the wrong decision by sending an untrained crew out to go do the job. And again, you can't train for everything, but if you train with a diverse enough idea as to what you're going to go do, a hoist offshore to again in the middle of the night in the middle of the Gulf of Mexico, if you've not trained for that is a big ask.
Yes.
Once you have done it, it's a benign hoist, right? Again, tight insertion area or whatever. It's like it's not a big ask once you've trained for it, and that's the big difference. Same event, if you haven't trained for it, that's a big ask. Yeah.
And this is what's going to bring me into our next case.
The way we spent Valentine's Day, whatever year it was.
Yeah. And that's with our cruise ship. So Chris Gellene was the other guy on the cruise ship. We've already talked to Pat Barber. He was there.
Oh, okay.
We've already talked to Eugene Reynolds. Mm-hmm. He was there. Evan is going to be coming on soon.
Oh, is he? Awesome. Oh, good.
So he'll be there. So basically, everybody that was on that crew that day is going to be, their perspective. And this is really fun because I'm going to tie everything in together. We have training, and one of the bonuses about us is that we had an opportunity to train quite a bit. Like we had a lot of hours to train in a 2-week period.
A beautiful thing about the commercial program at Era was they had customers that part of their contract paid for training. And when you had one of the customers was Shell, and they understood that you had to have a trained crew. So it's a difficult thing. It's emergency response. You hope to have a target flight hour of 0. But the less you fly, the less proficient you are in whatever you're doing. And we're asked to do a great many things. Like you could, again, go hoist to a vessel dead in the water. You could be doing open water work. You could be hoisting to the tight area. You could be hoisting to a super tanker.
Yeah.
At the end of the day, there's a lot of similarities, but there's a lot of differences. So it's a perishable skill. So that's big asks, some of these things. So you have to train for them. Shell understood this. So and these other companies. So and they paid for it. So this was a thing for our operator. It was a very symbiotic relationship. The customer paid for X number of hours of training. So there's revenue immediately in that contract to the company. So they're making money when we're training. It's keeping us proficient. They get proficient pilots and flight crew, and it works very, very well. Again, that's when times are great. Once times get rough, then budgets get cut, training budgets go down, all that sort of stuff. In the training, it also helps to train for what you're going to go do.
So this is, before we go too far into that, I want to say that if, like all of our training that we had actually helped us to what we're about to talk about with that cruise ship. Mm-hmm. Right? Because we had trained so much together. We knew everybody's kind of idiosyncrasies as we flew, as what we did, how we spoke, what we were expecting the other guy to do, even though we had never seen a cruise ship before.
But we had a lot of experience with each other.
Right.
So that helps bolster the success rate of that. Yeah.
For it, for our training specifically, we did not get a lot of boat training.
Yes, and just the thing with the cruise ship that I always have to point out to people is there were actually 2 ships involved, right? So there's a cruise ship, and then there's the workboat.
That's right.
And that wasn't a huge workboat.
No, it wasn't.
Everything that we picked up, everything that got put onto the Carnival Triumph had to come off of that workboat.
That's right.
So, yeah.
And it was loaded with stuff. There was not a large hoisting area.
No, it was tight area. It was a small vessel. There was a again, it's a kind of a big ask.
Yeah.
So one of the things we had problems with, again, although they were very generous with the flight hour for training. They weren't great with additional assets, you know, and this is, again, it's a big ask. But if you want that service, you have to train for it.
Right, agreed.
So they didn't ever get us vessels, and that was one of the problems that we brought up time and time again, is we need to go do vessel training. We need to do vessel training. You would think, being owned by an offshore shipping company, that you would have additional like avenues to get a boat to train with, right. But it wasn't the case. We we did a lot of legwork trying to find suitable training partners, and we exhausted a lot of avenues, and we were not successful. And then one day we get a phone call from Carnival management saying, please help us. That phone call was initially declined by the company, saying that's not what we do. And I was like, I thought that's what we did.
Yeah.
Yes, they are not a core customer. We don't service Carnival Triumph, but they are in need of transport of goods offshore or whatever. So
via a hoist or
the more appropriate thing would have been a belly hook, because of the weight limits on a hook versus a hoist. But we didn't have proficient long line guys, right? So we were definitely a reasonable asset to send in that direction. Eventually, after a couple more phone calls are made, we got sent out for it. So, and I was on day 2, and I was flying with Gene Reynolds, and Gene was an instructor in the program. So, like you said, we've flown together a whole bunch. It was OJT. So, and again, we've done a couple different things before, and if we're going to pat ourselves on the back, we did some fast picks. We did not play around with what we were doing. We moved a lot of equipment that day.
We said it a couple times. I don't remember how many hoists we actually did, but it was well over 100.
Yeah.
And you know, to put that in perspective for people out there, an average training flight would be about 4 to 5 hoists. Give or take.
Yeah.
On a high end, you're at 10.
Yeah.
So you're talking hundreds.
Yeah. And we were flying. We came from Fushan, I think, to that. So we had an en route, not a lot of time there. Anyway, it was a busy event.
Yes, it was.
And at some point, the Carnival Triumph drifted close to the continental U.S. I don't know what the distance was, but they had a news helicopter come and start filming us, and we were told at some point that we're live on CNN, and they captured at that point what Era considered one of its finest moments. You know, and I took that opportunity to remind them that they sent out a crew that was not really qualified to go do ship operations like that. So even if I wasn't the pilot flying, I wasn't even the pilot monitoring on vessel events. So it was an unqualified crew, and we had worked, so we'd always asked to go out to get the vessels to train with, and we were unsuccessful. So my very first vessel hoists were done live on CNN.
Yep.
And at the time...
Well done, sir.
Yeah. And it all worked out, right?
It did.
And it's a cool story to tell and all that stuff.
Yeah.
But behind the scenes, I went right back to the company and said, you just witnessed my checkout live on CNN.
How did I do? Did I pass?
And they said, they're like, we were watching it, realizing what was happening.
Yeah.
Like they knew, oh shit.
Yeah.
They're on CNN. There's a lot of helicopter footages of helicopters crashing. So it is very conceivable that we could have had an accident that day. So again, the whole event.
Now hold on. Wait a minute. I am going to put that in perspective, because, again, with all of our training up to that point, all of our crew, you guys up front, an accident was like
it's on the table, but there was no there was at no point that I was uncomfortable doing it.
Okay,
None,
okay.
right? But
yeah,
big picture, when companies send guys out, because this is what happens is like the guys that get on the spinning backboards and all that sort of stuff, they tell you to just go out and try. And they remove the human factor from this because all that you're going to do at that point is fly to the scene of the crash, because you're either successful in it or you're going to crash trying, because you're not going to get onto a scene, look at it, see the injured people or whatever it is, and then say, I don't think I can do this, and then fly away cleanly. Right. You're going to go try until you scare yourself and wave off, or you crash, or you're successful, or you crash. Or you have whatever that occurrence is, and so you can't underestimate training guys. And this is the same thing back to the guys with the spinning backboard. I just want to say, I'm not, like, when I say it's an easy problem to fix, anybody that does this, has done it, knows it is a very easy thing to fix. And it's very frustrating to see that the guy is trying his hardest and he doesn't know how to fix it. Like, that's not, he is in that pilot is so stressed at that moment. It's like, that is not what he set out to do.
I'll throw the hoist operator in there
hoist operator too.
He's like, man, we have a spin.
Yeah.
And you and I have heard it together where you've heard guys say, Captain, I have a spin. What do you want me to do?
Yes.
So now you have a guy in the back asking the guy in the front, well, you're the one hoisted. What do you want me to?
Yeah.
What?
There should be. So with our hoisting to the Carnival Triumph, it was nothing but fun. I had a blast that day because of the crew that we had on board, right?
It was awesome.
But again, I tried to leverage it to say, look, like, again, a cruise ship is one thing.
Yeah.
The workboat's another, and now you are potentially asking guys to go do this to small vessels dead in the water at night. You can't ask a guy to try that. Like, that's you have to train them, set them up for it, and even then, well-trained, well-qualified crews still have occurrences and accidents, and because of a momentary bad decision or bad luck or mechanical failure or whatever it is, and the training of it is it's one of those things. Again, it doesn't have to be technical training. This is one of the things, and I'll come out and say this, I didn't have a lot of wheeled experience before I joined the SAR program. Again, I'm flying single engine skidded helicopters, and I got a token transition into the 139 before I really ever got to fly it. So one of the things, I remember Joey Heaslett and he was also more experienced than me with hoisting operations and all that stuff, but he was doing it in a Huey. So again, not a wheeled helicopter. I remember one day just going up to Gellene and just ground taxiing. Like, that was training that we were doing, right? And it sounds nuts. And I remember the company was like not happy to hear about that, but it was what we needed to get proficient in our job. It sounds really silly, but like, we needed that basics of like how it wasn't just ground taxiing. Like, we were trying to do tight turns where you put the toe brake on the inside wheel, pedal turn with the other one, and then you can kind of pivot inside. So if you had to do like a really tight ground turn or something like that, we're just getting familiar, getting more proficient in wheeled helicopters. And again, that's not something...
And that's coming from skid helicopters to now wheeled helicopters. There is a difference in how you fly them.
Absolutely. And it doesn't... I've always been a building block guy when it comes to training. Like, you have to know the basics of things, right? Like, when I ever get transitioned to a new helicopter, the first thing I want to do, and the first thing I instruct guys to do when I'm training them, they haven't flown a helicopter, is you got 15 minutes of just picking it up and setting it down. Just finding out where the landing gear is, wheels or skids or whatever. Just pick it up, set it down. Pick it up, set it down. Pick it up, do a crosswind, set it down. Pick it up, turn, tailwind, set it down. Hover just a little bit. Figure out where the heights are. Like, it's incredibly basic stuff that if you don't get, you'll fight the rest of your time flying it because you have to shoot an approach to a hover height and they don't know what that skid height is or whatever it is. So again, the training that we had has to be appropriate to what you do.
Yeah.
And it has to be needed, and you have to have this is one of the things, like, again, despite your opinion of me as a pilot, I think
all right, you know what, I'm bringing you back down to mediocre. Does that help you?
I don't think I'm a good pilot. I don't think I'm a good stick pilot. I think I have a very, very strong situational awareness, and that helps me from making really bad decisions. I can see when I made a small bad decision and what's going to come next. Right?
That's not going to work out well.
That's the thing I've always felt about pilots, is it's the personality aspect of it that makes a good pilot. I mean, again, there's a basic level of proficiency that you should be able to maintain, but you don't have to be that great to be a good pilot if you have a good situational awareness, and this is, again, things like Peter and Gene, the great pilots, but also very cerebral guys. It's I think the personality, and what I got out of SAR was the crew aspect of it. Is that I've said this before, and again, not stroking your ego, rescue swimmers are some of the best people I've known. So,
thanks.
And that, and I mean that sincerely. Like, I think, again, like we had this conversation, nobody knows what is said of you when you're not around or whatever. But like a good friend of mine, John, back in Florida, is just my best friend. Like he's not helicopter guy, right? His son Magnus is. He was looking for something to do, and he was considering the Coast Guard, and he's got a swimmer's build. He actually does swim competitively, and I was like, rescue swimmers are the best people I know. I said, I don't know what they were before they became rescue swimmers, but what they come out on the end, whether it's Coast Guard or PJ or Navy or whatever, it's like every rescue swimmer I've known has been a really, really good guy. I can't think of a single rescue swimmer that I don't think incredibly high of, So, but with that, maybe I've been very fortunate with the guys I've come across.
Hey, probably.
But it's also like the aspect of, like, I don't like everybody. Anybody that knows me knows that. So, like, it's not for the people who don't. Like, I'm not bullshitting that. Like, your rescue swimmers, I don't think highly of a lot of people, but I do think highly of almost every rescue swimmer I know. I can't think of anybody that I don't, but that crew aspect, I think, is one of the things that not everybody gets about search and rescue. And so from a pilot perspective, because we've had this conversation about what makes a good pilot, or again, to fit in search and rescue, you don't have to be Chuck Yeager. You just have to know that you're part of a crew,
right? And
you're human, so you're fallible, and you can make good decisions and bad decisions. And if you make a good decision, great. And we can discuss why you made that good decision. Maybe you could have made a better decision. You didn't see something the way it was. Or if you made a bad decision, you own up to it, and then you move on.
Owning up to it is a big one.
A buddy of mine I hang out with from time to time, this guy Joe Rogan, he says he's not married to a lot of stuff. Like, I say that phrase all the time. Like, I'm not married to things, but one of the things you have to not be married to is your mistakes, right? Like, I beat myself up. Like, if I take a test, I'm a very fast test taker too, right? It frustrates people because I don't believe in torturing myself. Like, if I know a question, I know it. If I don't, I'm not going to beat myself up about it, And I'll check to make sure I passed. Like, if I know I got this one, I'm like, okay. But what I remember are the questions I got wrong, not the questions I got right. So, and that's, you can beat yourself up over that. But at the end of the day, when it comes to this stuff in aviation, I always realized I'm not hanging my report card on my mom's refrigerator anymore. You need to know this stuff. Some stuff you don't need to know, but you need to know it. And you also have to admit when you make a mistake, and you're going to make mistakes. You're going to make mistakes all day long doing things. So that personality trait, I think, is what makes a good pilot. Because I don't, again, being pretty objective, I'm not the best like stick and rudder guy, you know. But anyway, that's what I think when I was part of the SAR program. That was one of the things, and you know this, whether any person in that group affects the whole as far as how everybody gets on. Because
right.
again, like I remember my training with John Inman, and I had a great time.
Yeah.
But I do recall switching hoist operators one time, and we did not have a great communication, and I was like ready to quit because of not that lack of communication, where we were not on the same page with stuff, you know.
Right.
So I think it's that the personality to me is what makes a good pilot, not the stick and rudder type stuff. Anyway, that's I don't know why I was talking about rescue swimmers being the best guys I know. But
it's just it's that whole CRM and everything about, you know, just having that good crew. Yeah. Because like I'm with you, you can't have like, I guess for you as a decent pilot, I'm gonna call you a decent pilot now. Yeah. There are things you can make up for guys in the back who are having a complicated time, a difficult time learning. You know, guys that are in training, you know, and myself included. So when I went through training, you were making up for my deficiencies. I am at the spot where I feel like I'm a good enough hoist operator where if I have a poor pilot up front or a struggling pilot up front, that I can make up for his
difficult. What he's lacking on. Yeah.
So if he's drifting this, he's drifting that, I can make corrections on my end quicker, and I can anticipate what's going to happen. And that is a big key component to all this. So.
And I think circling back, the training you have with your experiences gives you the ability to anticipate what's coming next. Yeah. I have to say, when we talk about guys in training, I remember with Bobby hanging out the side of a helicopter in the Gulf of Mexico, we were training to go do, as it happened, the program was expanding, and we had new pilots joining the program, and then new hoist operators and all that stuff. And this one day in the back, the hoist operator is an experienced guy, but hadn't hoisted in a while or whatever, and he'd never hoisted in a 139, and so and also I'm going to throw this. He was Coast Guard, and and when you say experienced, like 20 years hoisting, the same way, standard Coast Guard style, because Coast Guard really does just kind of one way of hoisting, forward and right. Okay, so forward and right. Yeah, forward and right. And the hoist operator in a Black Hawk sits, right? On the
or has a knee. Yeah.
But he's not standing on the skid the way you do in the 139. Right. And so his experience was he was not comfortable standing on the skid. Yeah. And I just remember, again, the difference in experience from the standpoint of Bobby Watson is just sitting on the outside of the helicopter like, come on out. And I look back, and he is like on the sponson, like just kind of coaxing him out, like, come on, it's cool out here, like it's fine, you know, you tethered, all that stuff, right? So when you talk about a good pilot making up for somebody and whatever the other guy's doing, there's a balance with it, right? Like a guy isn't going to learn if you're constantly making up for his deficiencies. So this was one of his first times, again, in a while hoisting, and it was a left seat hoist, and which means that it's not forward and right. At best it's forward, but generally it's going to be forward and left. So his calls kept being forward and right. But I knew where the insertion point was. I didn't have my eyes on it through the whole evolution, of course, but I knew where it was, and I knew where to position the helicopter to get his hook where it needed to be, despite what his con was. Yeah. So, but that was appropriate for that time because he was just getting into the pattern of things. Yeah. And then I remember looking back at Bobby, and just like you said, when somebody nods their head like they have to see it, I just sort of shrugged my shoulders a little bit, nodded my head, and he was like, gave me a wink and a nod, and I was like, okay. So as soon as he said forward and right, I went forward and right. And he lost sight of the insertion point and the rig, everything. Yeah. And he...
helmet fire.
Yeah, he had a helmet fire. So... afterwards, Bobby said exactly that to him. He said, look, you have to mean what you say, and you can tell that we're not going forward and right despite your cons. He's like, so this guy is making up for your your slack there. So when he did what you told him to do, you had a helmet fire. And you did that. Now, again, you can make the argument that what he said before got the correct result, but the reality is when I got to doing what he said, it wasn't what he wanted. And that's a funny thing because, again, very experienced guy, just was so used to saying the same thing and did not change that plan.
Right.
So that's one of the things, again, flying with you. I have always appreciated your ability to adapt, assess a situation, call wave offs and stuff when it's appropriate, and I've always liked your demeanor because one of the things I always like to push at an after action debrief is really how calm, cool, and collected the hoist operator is, because all you have to go off of is your voice. I've had enough oh fucks coming from the back with moments of silence that you're like, we're going to need more than that.
Can you elaborate, please?
Elaborate. Where sometimes it's nothing, and then other times it's something. But you don't know because now you're playing Mad Libs of like what there's no standard phraseology for oh fuck.
It's oh fuck. I just dropped my phone out of my pocket and it hit the ground and exploded. Now we have the oh my gosh, and now we have the reason for it. And that's that's all I need. That's all I need. If you're gonna say that,
just follow
it up. Follow it up. It's two things that drive me up a wall. Gosh.
But I've had guys, one of the things, and again, people don't know, I can't remember the kid's name, but we had a difficult call out, and we had some difficulties on it. It was a tight insertion point. It was a moving vessel, and and it was dark, and it was dark and stormy night, all that sort of stuff. And there was he never broke his tone of voice, which he was effective in communicating everything that was going right, wrong, and indifferent. But afterwards, I told him, I was like, that is a phenomenal asset to this job because you are not easily exacerbated. Like and again, he didn't even really know that he was doing that. And I was like, please be aware that you're doing a great job and it's appreciated up front because again, he didn't know what the other hoist operators did on a daily basis because he was he was the hoist operator all the time. He wasn't a rescue swimmer or whatever.
No, I totally agree. And that goes the same like the other way too. Like if if I hear your voices elevate in the front, well now the hair's going the back of my neck up and I'm like, hey, what's up?
That's another one with experience where a lot of people, when you may not realize that the first thing that goes is the speech. Like when I had that stuck throttle and I told Chris to shut the mixture in the fuel valve, his retelling of the story was that Chris Gellene was uncharacteristically quiet. And that non-verbal cue tells you a lot. Like when again, if somebody says oh fuck and then shuts up, they may be completely saturated or not, but generally if you like when you stop talking, that's the clue. And even with the new pilots that I fly with, and like when we're doing the forward and right 30, forward and right 20, like I said, it's not important that you respond to every single one, but just respond to them periodically so that they know that you hear them and that you are in some way complying with what they're telling you to do. I said, because even though, like, because as soon as you stop talking, they may not pick up on the fact that you're saturated, or maybe you're new to it or whatever. But it's an interesting thing where the more you fly with people, specifically that in that environment, there's the communication gets so much deeper. So
and I've done it too. Like you just you lock up and you're like, oh, And the greatest part for you guys up front is, especially for me, if I lock up, is like, hey, what's going on? Yeah. My bad. This is what's up. Sorry. And now I start into my explaining what's going on. And it could be as simple as my eyes are in the cabin and I'm buckling these guys up, or
hey, what's up? The bump that you don't hear.
Yeah.
I think of Tim Adams. I wasn't on board, but he had a day. He was flying with the crew, and they were both heads down, playing with doing a little instruction on the avionics. And Tim, through his training, was always taught to speak up. Like, if you see two guys heads down up front, speak up.
Yeah. Who's flying?
It's exactly what it said. Hey guys, who's flying a helicopter? Yeah. And I wasn't there for it, and I'm not going to say who all was flying, but this is a difference in personality. Is one guy was like, oh, yep, sorry, I got it, I'm flying. And the other guy was like, if you keep that up, I'm going to close the curtain. Like, that's not the response you want. And that guy was a very experienced, very competent pilot, but his demeanor didn't work well in that group environment,
right?
And that's one of the things, again, like getting to SAR and getting with you guys. Like I couldn't think of anything better than going and doing that. Like that you get to go hang out again, 50 feet over the water, and then drop down and get, have guys jump out of the back of the helicopter. Like, how cool is that? Like, or I could go take another 12 people and put them on a platform offshore.
Well, this, you know what? I didn't mention this earlier, but this is one of the very unique things about you specifically, and why I hold you in a high regard, is because you did all this civilian side. The majority of us have had some sort of military type or police force or firefighting type government background, where we have a training budget, where we have the specialty training. You start from ground zero and you build up. You came into the program and are awesome. Like, and
I think it's a testament to the well, even through audits and all that sort of stuff, and I even think about when we did that Carnival Triumph case, like, it's a testament to the guys in the back. You guys brought the professionalism to the team, because very few people at our company at the time had any experience with it. Right. So your organization in P1 was great. They were the professionals in the organization, and then everybody kind of rose to that level. And because it was an active program, this is a problem we have with other programs, is that was an active program. Like, we were busy doing call outs. Again, there are a lot of hoist operations. I wouldn't call it, it wasn't SAR. I mean, it was SAR capable, but we're going to known locations. Nobody's on fire. All that. I mean, again, we had some other things, but
normally just a hoist medevac, and we did a hoist about 30 to 40% of the time.
Yeah, quite often.
So let's go 30%. Let's put it on the lower end, but still 30% of your calls being a hoist.
And then we have a robust training program, and we had good guys like Gene and Peter that made it easy to learn with guys. And even like Peter in particular, when he and I worked together, one of the really big things why we work so well together, and again, Peter Kelly is the smartest guy in any room he walks into. He hides it very well. And I mean that in the best possible way. Like, he is also humble. We were able to spitball ideas off of each other, and if one of us had a good idea, we acknowledged it. If one of us had a bad idea, we're like, oh, yep, that was shit, let's move on. And that helped us. Again, two civilian guys that, again, I consider Peter one of the greatest assets in aviation that I know.
Me too.
But it's civilian and military, it doesn't make a difference from what I've seen. It's personality, because we've had some military guys that were incredibly squared away, but you did not enjoy sharing a cockpit with. And yes, they were proficient, but that wasn't the safest helicopter, because you had conflicts, personality conflicts. That's an interesting thing, the civilian versus military side of the house. And there's always this misunderstanding too of what everybody has their preconceptions of what the other guy does.
Yeah.
You know? And so from a military or civilian standpoint, it's there's really good pilots on both sides, and there's really shit pilots on both sides. And coming from a particular background doesn't make you the greatest fit for that job either. It may just be something that you've done for a very long time. But
right.
I think, and I'm sure, like you said, the names that you've talked about for the pilots like Noah Cowan and Peter Kelly, civilian trained guys, and there's some of the strongest pilots I know. And even from the back enders.
Yeah.
John Ships is.
Oh yeah, John Ships is an amazing hoist operator.
Yeah,
phenomenal.
Because he's a great. He's a really good guy.
Yeah.
It didn't matter that he didn't have that experience, but because we had a high tempo operation, you're able to train people within that. If you don't have that, you're not. Without the tempo of the operation and what we had for a training program, you're not going to have good guys.
Right.
You're going to be very lucky to have good guys because the program isn't what sets people up for that sort of success. But yeah, I'm 100% civilian. Yeah.
Love it, dude.
Yeah.
Chris, we've been on for a long time, man.
Yeah. Well,
dude, thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, I am. I'm pumped you came on. So
I'm always glad to be here.
Sweet. Well, I'm gonna let you go, and if we can sit down maybe again, dude, I'd be all about it.
I'll see you tomorrow.
Awesome. And with that, ladies and gentlemen, we are out of here. Thank you for tuning in. We hope you enjoyed this episode of the Real ResQ podcast. Please take a minute and, like my daughters like to tell me, like and subscribe. Oh yeah. I'm pulling chocks and taking off. But before I go, if anyone out there has a rescue story that they would be willing to share, I would be humbled and honored to have you as a guest. Or if you have any questions about any of the rescues or anything else that we talk about here on this podcast, send me an email. therealresq@gmail.com. That's TheRealResQ@gmail.com. You can also check us out on our Facebook and Instagram page at The Real ResQ. That's at TheRealResQ. I also want to give a special thank you to all of you staying on the watch today. Always remember that when that SAR alarm goes off, those in distress are praying for a miracle. They are going to get you. Until next time, fly safe and swim hard.